All right, good evening. I am Michelle Kent. I am the principal at Georgia Matthews. And I thought, who better to share about our school than some of our amazing Panthers? So I will let them introduce themselves. Can you say your name really loud and your grade?
My name is Ethan and I'm in second grade. My name is Alexandra and I'm a first grader. My name is Nate and I'm from a kindergarten. My name is Yaden and I am a second grader.
My name is Aiden. I'm from a third grader.
So we are here to share with you about all of the fabulous stuff that we do throughout the school year. And since they're the experts, and they're going to be able to give you some of those great details that we have. So every week at our school, we have what's called the Panther Plains Bank. It's a bank where we've been paired up with Golden Plains for many years, where our fourth graders run it. Students get to make deposits, and so that's something that I look forward to every week to working with. And then we have the Be Kind Club, and the Be Kind Club was started 2 years ago by our fourth graders. They read an article in one of our benchmark magazines, and they wanted to start a Be Kind Club where they did kind things for people. So who wants to share about the Be Kind Club and what we guys do?
Be Kind Club is about you can like the pictures, we have to like the sentences and we have to like the emojis.
So every time that we meet, we have somebody special that we want to recognize, right? And then you guys either make a card or a poster for them or something to show them how much we appreciate everything that they do. Is there anything else that we do for Be Kind Club? What else? Do we get to work with other people?
Yeah.
Yep. So is it just second grade and third grade, or is it our whole school?
The whole school?
Yep. Anybody who wants to join it on Tuesday mornings get to come to the library and then be a part of our Be Kind Club. We have robotics. What did we do in robotics this year? That one? Well, that's okay. We're a robotics person here. So our robotics is open to our third graders and fourth graders. We were able to compete this year. We had about 15 members. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday, and then they start from scratch at the beginning of the year, put their robot together, and then we had a chance to compete this last year. So they had a really good time with that. And then every month, at the beginning of the month, we meet with our Panther families. Can you guys share what Panther families are?
Panther families are like when you get to go with your teachers and then you get to like work with projects, meet all your bring your friends, get to know about them. I think that was it.
So all of our Panther families have a kindergarten friend, a first grade, a second grade friend, a third grade, and a fourth grade friend. And then sometimes we make projects that is just for ourselves. Like last month we did It's Not a Paper Plate, It's a, and they did a creative craft. In February we made Love Monsters, so we got some puddings and we decorated them, and then we handed them out to different communities here in Garden. So we try to do a project that's either for the community or something that the students just get to explore and do with their Panther family. And then what we've been trying this year, every quarter we are getting together. The students get with their teachers and they make a math and a reading goal. And then they're working towards this goal, and if they reach their goal by the end of the quarter, then they get to join our Goal Crusher party, right? So who wants to talk about our Goal Crusher? All right, Aiden and Bailey, nice and loud.
We go do something for our goals, and we do everything that when we pass our goal test, we can go to the Goal Crusher.
To our Goal Crusher party. So far this year we had a trunk or treat in October, and then in December we had our winter carnival, and then Gaten, what did we do in March?
In March we went to the movies.
We got to the movies, and then do you remember what we're doing next month in May when you pass your goals?
We're going to Scout Park.
We're gonna have our tie-dye party.
Oh, tie-dye party?
Yep, we're gonna get school t-shirts, and then we're gonna tie-dye those as well. Each goal is based on the student need, whether it's reading or math or both of them, and then skills that are gonna really help them out through that next quarter. And then we have fun stuff that we got to do is bring your parents to school week, right, to PE. So we had parents help with that. This year we've done goodies with our grandparents and goodies with our grown-ups. The spelling bee.
In spelling bee, they like give you a little practice, and then after that, you like do the real one, and then they will give you a word. But if you get that right, you like get to stay in. But if you get it wrong, you have to sit down. And every single day, they give you like a new word you learn about.
So that was fun. And then in March, we celebrated Read Across America Week. And so we got to reach out to community members, staff members, and board members. They came to our school and they read different books to our classes, which now it's the second year we've done it. And it's a tradition that we want to continue doing. So those are just different activities that we get to do at school to continue to keep things fresh and just keep our families all together, right? And then our latest good news, which I'm barely going to share them with the first time, is that on Friday we were informed that we have been the recipients of the Enhancing Spotlight Recognition. It's a award that is given to a school that does things that continue to make and grow a positive school culture. And so we have morning announcements. What do we do in the morning announcements? We have jokes of the day.
Yeah.
People give shout outs. We go over our lunch menu. We talk about who's been doing a great job with Dreambox and Fast Forward. But it's just a positive way that we start our school day, right?
Yep.
And so because we've been able to work on that and we've morphed it into a really positive, great thing for our school, then we are being recognized for that initiative here next month. So that's just something that we're really excited about. All right, and what do you guys think about Georgia Matthews? Do you guys like our school?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have, the Gitrons are right here. There are 4 siblings, and then we have Gaden, and then Yasli's in the audience as well. Is there anything else you want to share about our school?
We have, like when teachers think we're doing good, we like have like a little dessert.
We have sweet treats every once in a while. Yeah, sweet treats, and we do a lot of positive behavior reinforcement with our kiddos. So sometimes it's sweet treats, sometimes it's dance parties, sometimes it's crafts. We're gonna have some basket gives away here in the next couple weeks. And so just always recognizing when we're making good choices and doing good things, right?
Yep.
That is Georgia Matthews.
Okay, board, do we have any questions?
Math. Alex. Art. Math. PE. Nice. Good answers, guys.
Well, thank you for coming to present to us. I know it can be scary to get up. We actually have a full crowd tonight, so are you scared to get up and talk about your school a little bit? Okay, well, will you come and shake our hands? Come and meet us, and thank you for coming to our meeting tonight.
Yes, we have Miss Kitch here as well. She is our behavior teacher for our sped teacher for the behavior classroom, and so she's also a great support in our school. Let's go stand over there.
Stand around the side. There you go. Good job.
Mrs. Kitch, you want to come on this side?
Sorry.
You guys?
I heard kids, sorry.
All right, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Excellent, thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at correspondence. Do we have any correspondence tonight? Thank you, Stephanie. And we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Can I get a second? Okay, do we have any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay. We'll move through discussion items with board goal update.
Okay, I'm gonna give an update on Kisa today. I don't see Can you move it?
You need the what?
To move it from side to side? You probably can't do that.
Oh, yeah, we borrowed that from Heath.
Oh, okay. Can you help?
Yeah.
Okay. Just move these slides.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. This button. So
Got it.
so I don't have to stand over there. Okay. My bad.
Pressure.
All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about our Kisa report. Everything is in and submitted to the state, so we're really excited about that. So a little bit about the process. It is a cycle, if you will, a 5-year cycle, and we start out setting goals. We do kind of a needs assessment the very first year, choose goals to work on. We aligned ours with your goals that you had for your strategic plan. And then we go from there and try to grow those goals every year. Then in the end, you'll see the last one says analyze results and begin a new cycle. So that's where we're at now. We just finished our 5-year cycle. So we've got that end of cycle data. So we'll use that. We'll set a new strategic plan next year and use all of that data to start all over again. So that is the process currently. I've been hearing from KSDE that there will be some changes to this process next year, so I'm kind of waiting to see how we start that out. You should all have a page that looks like this. So again, a little bit of history for you on this. This is in a one-page document, everything that the state asks us to report on. So the report is lengthy, and all of our schools are involved in this. As a district, we have district goals from your strategic plan, but each building has a building plan as well. So they keep that on a system called Industar, and they set their building goals that will work for them, or things that they feel that fit underneath those umbrellas of those top 5 board goals. So before I get too far into this, we've got quite a bit of staff here, so if you're staff, would you kind of raise your hand for me? So I can guarantee you 100% that every single person that raised their hand here and the rest of them that aren't here tonight had something to do with this. Whether it was on their building plan or whether it was part of a district committee that worked on district goals. This was a full team effort, if you will, so everybody had a part of that, and I just wanted to recognize everything, that this isn't just a Glenda report, so. But as part of this, we have to say, how does our district meet these requirements for a successful high school graduate? That's part of the report. Under results, they want our actual data, so numbers for each of those areas, so social emotional, kindergarten readiness, individual plans of study, our high school graduation data, and our post-secondary success data. Those are all reports that you hear through the year, so I'm not going to get into a lot of the data tonight, but each one of those areas we have to report out on. Under the evidence-based practice, we choose 2 goal areas areas, and then we put our goals underneath there. So we chose relationships and relevance, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And then we also have to report out on all of the foundational structures. So each one of those areas is a separate report underneath this Kisa umbrella. And then compliance, I'm very happy to say, with Keith's help here, that we have no compliance issues. So we were able to go all 5 years without any compliance issues as noted by the state. So, all right. So the first area that we reported on was foundation structures. We have all of those in place that are required by the state. One of the biggest areas that they hit on and really stress that is a kind of a big point, if you will, for schools across the state is the required K-12 intervention program. It's real easy to do a walk-to intervention or pull 15-20 minutes from your day and get everybody working on interventions in our K-8 programs, but once you get to the high school and we're talking credits, it becomes a little more difficult. So we've worked really hard to get our plan in place. We do some double block classes. We have some separate reading programs for those that need it that can have a separate reading class. And we do good and bad, I guess. You can see on there that we have para-interventionists. So each school, as part of our ESSERS program, received another para, and the high school received 4 positions. Unfortunately, not all of those positions have been filled this year. So best intentions to add more support to our schools, but just lack of bodies prevented us from filling all of those. In the foundational structure for partnerships, this was designated by our OVT as a strength for us. So you can see some of the areas, I'm not going to go through all of them, but we do a lot with our parents. We do a lot with our community partners. You heard Mrs. Kent mention the bank. A lot of our schools have banks and have partners with various businesses in the community. We also have partnerships with Compass and Genesis, Live Well, the community college. So we truly are kind of a, it takes a village kind of thing. So that's where we're at. The OVT comments I've got up here in red so that you can very specifically tell. This is taken directly from their report back to us. So they said one byproduct of their community partnerships has been the growth of their IPS program. So that's the individual plans of study that our secondary folks do. Career fairs and monthly connections allow students to gain exposure to various opportunities as they work through their IPS. Garden City Achieve even brings in local businesses to speak with students at career lunches. So they noted what our folks are doing in the schools as a highlight. Under foundational structures for diversity and equity, some of the things that you've heard earlier again today, we do have minority, 80%, 59% English language learners. The McKinney-Vento was a spotlight for our outside visiting team. Monica and her team have gotten 2 grants totaling $128,000 to help our homeless students. And we do have, I don't know, Monica's here. Do we know what the current number is? It usually fluctuates between 80 and 100, somewhere in there.
I think we
We
passed 100.
passed 100 now, so that's why I have some of these folks here today, because it's always changing. But we always have some homeless students that we are addressing and trying to help. The Seal of Biliteracy is a couple of years now where it recognizes students that are fluent in 2 languages. They have to pass the English and they have to pass another, and there are 4 components, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this is the total package. This isn't, oh, I can read this and take a test. It's the whole deal. So they have to be fluent in 2 languages to get that award. And last year we had 12, I remember. Do you want to say 12? So, yeah, we keep hoping to grow that part a little bit as well. Communication and basic skills and state board outcome kindergarten readiness, I put those together. Again, we've used our ESSERS money to beef up our support for phonics. That was one of the areas I know in some of Jason's reports that he's pointed out that our K2 COVID really hit those kids hard, missing some of that instruction early on. And so we have used ESSERS money to provide additional phonics support, add those para-interventionists. And then we've really worked hard to get our parents involved in the ASQ Ages and Stages questionnaire early on. And this year we had a 1-day event at Forest Good, and we ended up with a total of 71% of our parents participated this last year, which was a huge growth. I think you can see it was like 20% to 71% OVT noted. So again, a big group effort, and we got a lot of people come in and help with that. One of the things that the OVT also noticed is that the elementary level Turn and Talks, as well as research-based language programs, have been implemented to increase opportunities for students to hone their written and verbal communication skills. These Turn and Talks have shifted the cognitive load from the teacher to the student. So again, challenging our students, making that curriculum rigorous and having them do the work, talking and communicating with each other, boosting those language skills at the same time. The next one is Civic Engagement. We've had three schools with Civic Advocacy Network Awards, Florence Wilson, Bernadine Sitz, and the high school. And this is one of the areas that the OVT felt like we had done well on, but they also asked us several questions about, so why just 3 schools? Do your other schools do something? So in order to get these awards, it is a process, and they have to fill out an application. So as I've gone around and talked to the principals this year, this has been one of the questions. So what are you doing for civic advocacy? What kinds of volunteer things are you doing? You heard Michelle talk about everything that her students have done. So I think we're gonna have a lot more schools fill out that paperwork this year, because I don't think they've just quite processed it. Oh, maybe we should see if we qualify for this award as well. There's also another award that Michelle brought up, the State Schools of Character. We did have 3 award winners that we were just notified this weekend. So Alta Brown, Georgia Matthews, and Garden City Achieve will be getting those awards next month. Physical and mental health. We have Tier 1 curriculum, Second Step, and CCC framework. We are currently looking at Leader in Me for next year to add that. Plymel is doing it and loving it, so we're hopeful that maybe that will take off in a few more schools as well. But we are required to have a Tier 1 curriculum, and so we have met that requirement. We have used ESSERS to add counselors, nurses, and a wellness facilitator. So the wellness facilitator specifically is addressing the needs of staff. So we are addressing students' needs as well as staff activities. We have offered adult and youth mental health first aid, and Achieve is piloting an ECHO anti-vaping program this year. In the arts, this was actually, it's a short slide, but it's actually one of our longer sections because they are doing such good work in that department. We have award-winning fine arts, theater, culinary arts. That again was also tonight as well. We have French and Spanish language offerings, and we have additional language through the Edgenuity program. So students can take just about any language they want to take, with Edgenuity being an option for them. Post-secondary preparation, all the secondary kinds of areas I've put together on one slide just for time purposes, and they all kind of relate back and forth to each other. So the OVT noticed over the past 5 years, the district has grown in this area. They have moved from a basic awareness to a systemic awareness approach. You can see the list of the things that we have really grown in, and I think Jenny Hands is probably gone now, but she's worked really hard on the work-based learning, the dual credit at the high school. Our counselors have worked a lot with the IPS process. We've had both middle schools and both high schools had the parent involvement component this year. So that's a change from last year. The high school did it last year, and a couple of our middle schools started it, but we didn't really push. This year it was, we're gonna try to get all of our parents in for this. We have a KSU career advisor and an at-risk counselor that were added. The at-risk counselor was with ESSERS dollars as well. They ended up saying during the 5-year cycle, high school graduation has risen from 86.8% to 90.8%. Garden City Achieve Alternative High School has risen from 53.7% to 73.8%. So a huge jump for Garden City Achieve. And again, we need both schools to be successful to see that district rate go. All right, the OVT recommendation for these areas. Continue to spend time evaluating the post-secondary success data of both Garden City High School and Garden City Achieve. Analysis of this could help further focus the IPS of students in both buildings, as well as provide a blueprint for future partnerships with Garden City Community College, as well as the business and industry sector in your community. Continue to increase the partnership with parents regarding the IPS plans for each child. an in-depth discussion regarding the role of preparing students for the local economy versus the state needs may shape courses offered. This is exactly what we're doing with our Perkins need assessment. We're looking at what are the needs of the community, and then we're trying to work some classes toward that area, as well as listen to what the students want, because some of those areas, like the theater, I'll use that for example, in the culinary arts, that isn't a high need in Garden City, but it's a need for our students. They want to do those, and so we have to listen to our consumers, if you will, as well as what are the needs in the community, and put the pathways available to everybody. So the first goal is the relevance area. We chose to put in the AVID goal, the challenging, rigorous academic experiences, the PD plan, and the one-to-one iPad initiative for technology as our goals under relevance. They're worded just a little bit differently than your strategic plan because the state requires us to have measurable goals. So we had to put a percentage in there so that we could show where we were and where we ended up at. The OVT reported our dual credit courses grew by 77% over the last 5 years. CTE pathways grew by 13%. The K-8 technology plan for one-to-one implementation was achieved a full year early. We have reduced the number of students failing local common math assessments from 37% to 6%. We've reduced the gap in the number of students scoring level 3s and 4s on state assessments and ELA by 4% compared to our pre-COVID numbers. And we have over 50% of buildings incorporating AVID have remained fully trained. So that's the requirement piece of AVID, is to have that training piece. And 98% of graduates have completed at least one CTE course. So those were the notables from our OVT team that they took away and reported to the state. The second goal is the relationships. So this is the SEL piece. So those are the board goals on unhealthy behaviors, SEL initiatives, and then community partnerships and growing the college and the Perkins assessments and what we need from there. Again, the OVT noted on the next one, our tobacco and drug alcohol referrals have dropped by 20%. The mental health pilot program has doubled in the number of schools served, and our mindful student support program has increased support by 245%. So what has happened with that bottom one is Compass has increased the amount of support for case management and what they call mental health assistance. So essentially people that can sit and sit with a student that is struggling, sit with them. If math is their worst subject, they can sit with them during math time, for example. So those services have increased from Compass. We do have the therapy. The contract is there for us to do the therapy in the schools right now. We are going to Compass for therapy sessions because they are so short-staffed. So the OVT recommendation from these goals: continue to expand and develop community and business partnerships. As people change, do not allow these partnerships to dissolve. So they recognized how much our stakeholders are involved in our community and have really encouraged us to continue that piece. Continue to evaluate the local and regional labor markets to identify areas of potential growth in CTE and dual credit options for students. We're really working at that one. In addition to pathways, we're actually also looking at what classes do we need to offer at the high school. So essentially students could come very close to having their associates met when they graduate from high school. So we're looking at what are those requirements that the college has that maybe aren't pathway aligned, but are something we could offer for our students. Continue to push to expand AVID strategies across the high school while also growing the program at the middle school level. So I found out that our high school is a school-wide AVID high school, and our middle schools will meet their level. It's not called the same thing, but they will meet theirs as well, both middle schools. So that's really good news. We're doing that. Next year in September, we'll have 2 days in a row for in-service, and we're bringing in the AVID people, and they're going to train all of our secondary staff. So once again, we will be back to 100% certified teachers in all 3 buildings. And we're going to have to do that every so often just because of turnover. So it's impossible to send all of the new teachers every year to get trained, and we need to maintain that level as high as we can. Continue, let's see. Continue professional development opportunities for staff as staffing has become challenging. The district has continued to adjust mentoring opportunities for new staff, including long-term subs. The OVT really appreciated the fact that we have a program and a person that's in place just to support our long-term subs. So that was one of his things that he put in a couple of years ago, and Barb comes in and she works with all of our long-term subs. And it can be anything from how to run the copier to let's work on making your lesson plans as great as they can be. So it covers every little detail that they might need. So sometimes as we get busy at the start of school year, we forget some of those little things, but she makes sure that they're all in place for our long-term subs. And then the last one, continue to evaluate and update technology, the one-to-one plan, and make adjustments. And I think Roxy isn't here, but I'm pretty sure that you'll see a recommendation probably for a new plan either this summer or toward the end of the year. Okay, so the OVT is also asked to make a recommendation for next steps. They said as a new superintendent and district admin team come on board, they need to reconvene community engagement groups to develop a new strategic plan that looks at the formalized need assessment. The board, through this feedback, will then be able to help identify goals to be addressed in the new cycle. Using the template created over the past Kisa cycle, the district will be able to quickly identify new goals and a timeline to achieve these goals. So I think we all have our homework now, including the board. So we do have a template that we kept all of our data in, and that was in the book that we gave you probably about a month ago now. So we have all of that data at our disposal that we can look at, but we will need to bring in those groups again in our district site council and start looking at what are our strategic goals going to be for the next 5 years. And that will fall back on you eventually, so. Okay.
Well, it also said we're gonna be able to do that very quickly.
Because we have all the data already done, so from this year, at least some of it, so.
Good to know.
Yeah, we'll have to do some needs assessment kinds of things, but we'll have the Perkins that's just done, and we'll have our 5-year Kisa that was just done. So we'll have a lot of data at our disposal, if you will. That'll be really
I
nice.
mean, that part of it, yeah, I was gonna say, that's really good.
Right, that part will be really good. In summary, the strengths that they noted were our community partnerships. They specifically listed the college, Compass, and Live Well Finney County. Our stakeholder feedback, the staff focus groups, the community budget focus groups, which they're referring to our district site council that comes in every year and helps us prioritize how to spend the money. And then clearly defined and mapped out school improvement plans. So we stuck with our plan all 5 years. We didn't make any changes other than if the state asked us to, for example, make the goal measurable. So we stuck with our goals and really tried to make strides in those. The areas of growth that they noticed, continue to work on streamlining processes across all buildings. So this was one of the things that they felt, being a big district, for example, kids move from school to school, or even over the summer they're switching buildings. Do we have to carry paper files to another building if they're in student assistance team, for example? How do we streamline getting this back and forth? So we do have a system now. Jason's been working really hard on it in the Office of Instruction called EduClimber. All of our buildings will be on EduClimber, if you will, by the end of next year. They can keep all of their student files in there that are on academic plans of assistance. And that way, if a student switches in the middle of the year to a different school, it's right there. It just automatically is there with them. So I think that's one of the things that they noted last year and this year as well. And I'm hoping by next year we can say we've got that in place. Grow civic engagement across all elementary buildings. Again, I'm hoping we see a lot more schools apply for awards this year, and we do have the 3 that we just found out about. Continue to increase parental involvement with regards to IPS. We're on a good path with that. Look for ways to continue to train new staff on district initiatives. This was also something that they really stressed to us because we do have so many good things going. We're starting to see that incremental progress with our students and our data. We are doing like the turn and talk. So how do we make sure the new folks coming in get that? So we've been working with Suzette and Jason and his office have been working on that, having a plan for what we're gonna do with new staff so that they can kind of hit the ground running. Let's see. So limitations and barriers, staffing challenges, teaching shortage, district level administrator turnover, evolving demographics, and increasing migrant population. So those were our things that they noted were challenges for us. And that is it. So, questions?
How long does that whole process take?
So we started for our year 5 process, for example, we started meeting in September. And the first thing that we do is we go out to all the schools and make sure they've got their building plans in place. They share with us what their goals are, how they're going to go about. Usually every teacher is on a goal committee, if you will. And so we make sure that all of those are in place. We offer training for our new administrators on how to do that system. So that usually happens in September and October. Then we start working on where are we at with our district data and what does that put in place and what do we still have to do this next year, kind of over this year. We start out with monthly meetings. Jennifer Stanley was the board member that was on our committee. So I think she made all of them except the very last one. But we come together as a work group and say, okay, where's your group at? So Jason, for example, is in charge of some of the curriculum type items, and Monica is in charge of some of the like migrant. And so what's your department doing? Where are you at? What do we need to work on? What support do you need? We have a Nick in Monica's office that is our data support. So he built all of our data walls, if you will, so we could start plugging in our numbers. So it's been a year-long process. It culminated in our OVT in the first part of March. So we had to have it in March in order to have the state tell us whether we were accredited by May. So that's kind of my personal goal. I wanted to have that news before Dr. Carlin left. So.
But the overall Kisa is a 5-year process.
The overall Kisa is a 5-year process. We do that every year. And they ask different questions every year. Each year they this year we had to answer to everything, but last year, for example, they told us we didn't have to answer on the foundational skills because they asked that the year before. So, but this year it was a big long report.
And isn't that true because of sort of planning with that process?
So interesting that you asked that. Yes, it very much is that, but not every district does that. So we wanted to blend all of your goals with the Kisa because we didn't want to say, well, you have to work on the district goals, you have to work on the board goals, you have to work on Kisa, you have to work on. So we blended it and it was all one process. And I think that made a huge difference for us because we were looking at your top 5 board goals every time we met.
And so, in this out of the gates, short time it'll take us.
We hope.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of information here that just sort of sets us up. I mean, it's a good strategy, I think, that we have, working those two processes together.
Yes, I would
I mean, it's a whole lot easier on the teachers and the thinking process. And so now here we are sort of embarking on the next year in this process, but overall a 5-year.
And your 5-year cycle.
Yeah.
So not my presentation, but I might just add a little bit. So as Glenn was going through these things, think about the presentations that have come to the board. I mean, the Seal of Biodiversity, we had somebody when we were at downtown using their facility, somebody presented about that, graduation rates. Again, goes to what Mark's saying, all those things blend together so we don't have separate plans. It aligns with our strategic plan, everything we do with Kisa, provide that for us to accomplish our goals as a district. So very sound structuring. Linda doesn't give herself enough credit. Tons of work goes into that.
So, I mean, it's so noteworthy to this body, as we think through the next strategic plan, think about what comes from the staff to help us. It will be framed in the Kisa considerations. And then we can sort of work from there to adopt. But we have all of this process and all of this previous work and data and feedback that's really going to help both thinking processes. And so, yeah. It's just noteworthy. And so good job, I mean, a good job to the staff and I think it just sets the community up and everything that we work on very well to work on these two processes together.
So part of the work of that needs assessment you'll learn is even the building level, so they pick their individual goals, and so they may be accomplishing goals, and so they'll move those off their plan, but it doesn't mean they stop the work, that they feel like it's established and it's part of their culture, and they may add a few things. Well, you may be faced with the same thing as a board. Things that have been accomplished through this last 5-year cycle, we want to continue to do and grow, but it may not take the highlight that we need in some other areas, and that should be flushed out through our needs assessments.
So in thinking about that and the comment you just made, so how much does the historical stuff that we've done through Kisa, like how does it, because it sounds like this is a template for the next one, so is it like just a continual evolution from that, or is that just our process? Does that make sense? Like,
Right, so in theory, that is exactly what the state had in mind, Dana. However, like I said, I'm hearing that they're going to change that up a little bit. So I think that, for example, if you go back to the vision, I don't think all of the components are going to be on there next time. So I think they're gonna give us a new template and say, we want you to focus on. What I'm hearing is, the foundations and the results sections are probably going to be hit really hard. But again, as he said, if you think about all the presentations you've had, all of those areas that were on your strategic plan fall in underneath one of those areas. So I think we'll probably be able to use your strategic plan again, but I do think the process is going to change a little bit.
so do they let you know when they will make those changes, or? Is that
Yes,
a no?
they do let her know, but usually it's the day before. I mean, they were still making changes to what we were gonna report on our OVT less than 30 days before our final visit. They were still making changes to that
So
process.
my blood pressure does this. Because it was a constant change this last 5 years.
Yeah.
Mid-cycle, the last year. I'm hoping, I was reading a report that Dr. Carlin shared this morning, and it sounds like they're really gonna work hard at saying this is the next 5-year plan and try to hold it steady, if you will, through the next 5-year cycle. So,
I'm just wondering, as we approach our planning, and is this, do we still look at this template, or are they gonna have something else that we need to kind of hang out and wait to make sure we're?
yeah, no, I think that we are probably going to be wise to move ahead with our planning, because I think we'll be able to blend it in some way,
Yeah,
shape, or form.
like it won't be a super dramatic,
Right.
it will just be.
Right.
And the board will have work to do for a while yet to get to that. The needs assessment, working with district side councils, going through the process of developing the new strategic plan, that will take some time, and hopefully the state then kind of gets their stuff finalized.
Well, I echo Mark, thank you so much. I know it's a huge task. Thank you for your leadership in that, Glenda. It's amazing, and thank you all for coming tonight and being a part of that and all the work that you did too.
Madam President, I'm not sure I can say this better than Mark did, but first, a huge thanks to staff for all their work over the last 5 years on this. Glenda's leadership in this area has been amazing, and sometimes I think people think we don't listen to teachers, but one of the things we hear loud and clear often is you don't take things off our plate, but you always add things on. And I understand how frustrating that can be. And from the beginning when we did this, that meshing of these things was such a priority because we didn't want people to feel like it was putting one more thing on people's plate. And I love metaphors, so I love the metaphor of the people rowing the boat. And if we're all rowing the boat the same direction, the boat works pretty well. If somebody's not rowing, it's a lot harder on the other people on the boat. But if somebody's rowing the wrong way, sometimes then the boat doesn't even go the right direction. And so there's been a huge amount of effort and work to coordinate that work from the building improvement plans to match up with what the districts, that the board's goals have been, our strategic plan, and our hope has been that validates the work that the staff is doing, and we don't feel like, we don't have folks feeling like the work they're doing is for naught, or there's always something extra being added. And that doesn't happen without their work but also without some great leadership by the folks here, by our building principals. There's a lot of time and effort that's been spent. And, we've got some amazing results to point to. Our graduation rate has shown tremendous improvement. Our post-secondary success rate has exceeded the state's predicted range for us all 5 years. We've made great progress with IPS, with our kindergarten readiness, with the social emotional development of the addition of our screeners and our curriculums, and just really more than 5 years ago, that wasn't something we thought much about. It was always an afterthought, and now it's becoming part of what we do. So kudos, Glenda, to you and your team, and again to all the staff for the work, because that's when it really happens, when everybody's working together. So again, I didn't say it as well as you did.
Well, I don't know what I said. But I just know that there is so much work yet to be done. We just outlined the work to be done almost, but yet we are so blessed with the people who work and the processes we need to follow. We've got a great community, and so I think you can get encouragement, even though there's a lot of work yet to do, from the blessings to be counted in our community and our good folks. So thank you again.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to come to you tonight and talk about our proposal for math curriculum adoption. It's been 8 years since we've adopted a K-12 curriculum, so we're going to kind of step you through the process of what we went through. Tonight I've got Linda Davis, who's an elementary resource teacher at Edith Sherman, and she's going to represent elementary tonight, talking about some of the decisions we made around elementary. And then we've got Michelle Byer, who's a high school math teacher, and will be actually transitioning this summer into the district office. She has accepted a role as district instructional coach, and so she's going to be working with our data analysis, statistics, and then also helping with implementing math K-12. So we're very excited to have her come down to the district office and help. So I'm going to take the first just little bit and just talk about the process of what we kind of did to go through to get to the point where we are tonight. So starting in October, we surveyed the staff to establish kind of the requirements of what we wanted to look for, and then also establish some membership. So we surveyed, and we got 82 different responses from 82 math teachers in the district about what the strengths of our math program were, what were some of the weaknesses, and what were they looking for in the next round of the curriculum. So we took that data and we worked together to create our textbook adoption committee. The next slide has that membership on it of people that volunteered. We took any and all volunteers that wanted to be on it and established a pretty good team. In November, that team reviewed the survey data and really kind of analyzed, is this the direction that we feel like we're heading? And then we established the potential companies we wanted to look at and publishers we wanted to talk to. Then in December, we decided on the 3 companies for each level. And for elementary, we were looking at Eureka Squared. So it's just the second version of Eureka Math, which is what the district has had for multiple years. We also looked at Envision Common Core Curriculum, which Envision is a company from, used to be Pearson and now is Savas. And then we looked at Illustrative Math from Kendall Hunt in the elementary. As we started to develop this team, we really felt like there's bigger needs, K-6 as one team and 7-12 as a second team. So during this time, we realized that we needed a secondary team to focus on that and a elementary team. The secondary team, specifically the high school, they started this process actually back in the summer with Melissa Fast. She came in, we knew it was an adoption year, so she started working with the high school. They looked at Illustrative Math, published by Kendall Hunter. They looked at Reveal Math, which is a Houghton Mifflin product, and then they were looking at CPM. Do we know what CPM stands for? Okay, thank you. College Preparatory Math for our upper level math company. So they evaluated those 3 different products during December. In January, we had Zoom presentations from each of those companies to the committees. And then we established people within each of those committees to fill out rubrics based on the data that they received from their peers and what we got from those representatives. Then in February, we finished those up, we filled up the rubrics, and we narrowed it down to 2. So in elementary, we narrowed it down to Envision and Eureka Squared. And at the high school, we narrowed it down to Eureka, or the secondary, specifically the middle school, was Eureka Squared and Illustrative Math and CPM. So then as we kind of went through, our team got together. We actually met in here. It was one of the first times in our math textbook we got to meet together as a team and really had some great discussions. And the elementary team worked to finalize that decision, and we got some quotes. The elementary looked at Eureka Squared, and so Linda will talk about that here in just a second. The middle school was kind of split between Illustrative Math and Eureka Squared. They liked both of them, and it was really kind of a hard decision to come down to. And so as we looked at it, we felt the continuity between 7 and 12 was something that we really wanted, especially with teaching Algebra 1 at the middle school level in the honors 8th grade class. So we wanted that continuity between middle school and high school. So we made the decision to go with Illustrative Math for 7th grade through Algebra 2, and then CPM for our advanced algebra, trig, and honors trig classes at the high school. In April, we took the recommendation from that committee to the Curriculum Council. The Curriculum Council passed it out of committee unanimously, and now we're bringing it to the Board of Education with the hopes to be able to purchase in late May or early June. In working with both companies, if we're able to make that purchase pretty quickly, they believe we could have the materials here by the middle of June or by June 1. They have the materials ready to ship and are ready to send them to us if we need to. That would give the opportunity for some teachers to have the materials this summer to look at, and then we would be ready to roll out with the professional development plan starting in August. Prior to having this and going to the Curriculum Council Committee, we did put together with Eureka Squared a 3-year professional development plan. Some of the things that we heard through the survey was that the professional development was in the first year that we had the new curriculum, and then there wasn't anything as a follow-up. And so we worked with them on developing a 3-year professional development plan that would help cycle through multiple different strategies in those 3 years. But then each year we would be having our new teachers be able to go through the first 2 modules of professional development that everyone will go through next year. So they're getting those kind of basics. On our committee, here is our membership. I'm not going to read all of them off. They volunteered many hours. Probably 2 to 4 hours per month outside of contract time that they volunteered their time to just be able to dedicate to this, and we're really appreciative of all their work in doing that. They were a great group to really dive in, and we put them into some different teams to be able to kind of represent different areas, and we've got a lot of great feedback from them during this time. Not all of our discussions were always just head nod yeses. We had some good feedback back and forth. We'll say at the very beginning of this process, Linda was maybe more in favor of another curriculum, and through this process kind of went in another direction. So there was just a lot of great depth of work that was put into the process. So we'll talk about Eureka Squared, and I'll turn it over to Linda as she was kind of leading that group.
I am Linda Davis, and I teach first and second self-contained at U.S. Sharman. This program here for Eureka Squared, it's an updated version of the current math program that we use now. So we won't really have to learn anything new. And I think that's really good as far as when my kids were in school and when they hit about middle school, that's when we started changing it to Eureka, and it was like a total loss to them because they had not been taught in grade school the effects of Eureka. So to keep it the same is a good idea. Excuse me, this is an updated version. There's a new online application part for teachers to look, and students also to be assigned different centers, I guess you would call it, if they are needing extra interventions in those areas. We wanted to listen to needs of the teachers to adapt with the new staff that we get every year. It's helpful with if you're a seasoned staff member to help train the new staff members. And without professional development, but we will have professional development. Consumable workbooks, that's a big topic. That was the big topic for teachers. They do not like to make copies. So choosing this program, we get each teacher and each student will get a workbook, and that are consumables. And that is part of the price as far as what Eureka Squared has told us. Online intervention piece, I like this part because of teaching self-contained. One of the goals for the board is that all students will be on grade level by 2025 or 2024, I believe it is. Anyway, this will go side by side with what the kids are learning in the Red Guide classroom. We can also use it in self-contained classrooms. We can use it for resource. And pre-assessments to modules to identify gaps. So before we even start a module, teachers can give an assessment, and then we can see where kids are lacking and where we need to teach better. So decision makers it covers all the Kansas standards, has consumables and online resources. K-6 currently uses Eureka. This is just an updated version of Eureka. Technology, online module, pre-assessments. Flexibility has intervention lessons built in, and exit tickets for focus on higher order thinking skills. So I don't really use the higher order thinking skills to exit tickets in my classroom, but I do know that they use those. That was a big thing the committee talked about for the reg ed classroom.
And we may take questions on each one as it goes. That way we don't wait. Do you have any questions on Eureka Squared?
I do have a question
Yeah.
about the professional development piece.
Yeah.
So we have it for 3 years. Is this an online, is part of it online? Because my thinking is sometimes we get new teachers mid-year or something like that, or is it something that's set dates? How does that work?
Our hope right now is it is in person, and so they will actually send representatives out there. We will have one session in August before Teachers Report for administrators and coaches, and so our coaches will give what's called the lead session. And so that's a little bit of how do we lead, how do we use it, how do we help them. So if we do have some new staff that is coming in mid-year, our instructional coaches, as well as any teacher that they may be partnered up with would have some of those pieces. Our first session that we'll do in year 1 is called Power Up, and since we are an existing Eureka school moving to Eureka Squared, Power Up is that transition piece. Here's what you used before. Module 1, lesson 1 in first grade is the same lesson in the new series, but here's how you use the new tools to power it up and make it even more powerful for it. So that's the first session that we'll do. All new teachers and all math teachers will have that session, hopefully in sometime in August before school starts. The second session we will provide then in September during those 2 days when the secondary schools are having ABBA training. Then we have that one which is called Launch, and this is kind of the new features. Here's some things that you maybe haven't been able to use in Eureka before that Eureka Squared will be able to use, similar to the pre-assessment modules. So that's year 1. Year 2, then we come into what's called Assess, and that's just the deeper learning of how to use data on a daily basis to better instruct or make your lesson plans. And then the fourth part of it is called Data, and data is where we start using the summative assessments of the modules to start going back and providing just-in-time supports in the next module for students that are needing that intervention piece. So that's kind of our plan of rolling through those continuous 4 kind of each year as we have that opportunity. So our coaches, our instructional coaches will be heavy in that. Our district instructional coach, be it with a heavy math background, will be helping with those pieces as well. And then our hope also is then Barb Hothschild will also be working with us during that professional development so she can help the long-term subs with that training as well.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
So since we're currently using Eureka, do our middle school teachers feel like kids are coming in ready for middle school now?
Yes and no. I mean, they kind of always wish they were a little bit more. What our hope is that the middle school has kind of been in flux for the last couple of years of either piloting illustrative math or using Eureka. And so there's been this transition piece with some vocabulary and some language. We feel like we understand what the skill gap is, that they're not coming to middle school with these certain skills. And so that was one process we had during this adoption committee, was being able to understand where our vertical gaps are, which right now it's math, facts, and multiplication and division. And so there's some areas where we're going to look at how we can beef it up. Even if we were a K-12 one system, there's still going to be that gap when we jump from your intermediate grades to now we're getting into pre-algebra. So there's just a natural gap there that we do hope that we can fix. But I believe that was kind of a discussion we had. What do you think about this transition now between Eureka Squared and what IM will be?
I think it'll be better than having multiple things being used at the middle school, because then we'll have one thing from 7 through Algebra 2. And less transition opportunities, I guess. One transition from Eureka Squared to illustrative, and then not another one when they get in high school. So I think that should help a lot.
Great questions. Any others on Eureka Squared? If not, we'll jump into IM. Okay, so Coach Byron will talk about IM.
Okay, so IM's been piloted at the high school actually for almost a year and a half now. Several of us last year taught a couple of units out of it, and we really liked it. And so we asked Melissa to help us look at that curriculum as a pilot for this year also. But we wanted a couple of other things that we could pilot to compare it to. And so we also piloted Reveal for the second 9 weeks. And then I was one of the teachers that was teaching the upper level classes, and I really wanted to pilot the CPM curriculum, and so I've been piloting that one all year long. The illustrative, I think what's awesome about it is that it allows students to be successful even if they don't have a clue what you're talking about. And what I mean by that is a lot of the lessons start off with a problem, and all it says is, what do you notice, what do you wonder? There are no right or wrong answers. And it can allow students who might be reluctant to participate or even say anything about math to say something and not be wrong. And I think that that's the biggest fear that students have is, I'm gonna be wrong, therefore I am not gonna participate, and then they never engage. And so we all notice that the engagement with the students is a lot better. They feel successful because they can be right. Because we're not always looking for a specific answer. We just want to know what they're thinking. And the students enjoyed it. In fact, when we went from illustrative to Reveal, a lot of students were upset. They said, can we just go back and do illustrative like we did first 9 weeks? And they didn't want to do the Reveal curriculum. And so it was very successful with the students, and that's what we went back to second semester in the high school. And that's what we're using right now to finish up the year for next year. It's very user-friendly. It's compatible with Google Classroom, like, very easily. It covers all of our standards. We wouldn't have looked at something that didn't cover all of our standards. It's free, basically, if you sign up with an email. We do with the consumables, which will cost a little bit of money. Kendall Hunt makes consumables, and so that there's a little bit of a price tag there, but for the most part, the curriculum is free online. It's compatible with Desmos, and the kids learn a lot using the Desmos calculator. There are what are called Adaptation Packs. If you find that you have a bunch of kids, maybe that are not quite on grade level yet, then you can adapt the curriculum to help get them onto grade level. So that was really important. Pre-assessments for every unit so that we can see if we need to go back. It tells you the results, and basically if we need to go back and grab something from 8th grade math that they aren't getting before we start that unit. So I'm excited about it, and I won't be teaching it next year, but I taught it this year, and I really think the students have done well with it.
Any specific questions on IE? Now, I say at the very beginning, so this is going to have to be a vocabulary lesson. I call it illustrative math because it's spelled illustrative, but was quickly corrected that it's illustrative. So we have just shortened it to IM so that we don't have to worry about people pronouncing it right or wrong. We'll be told that.
Yeah, I had a quick question, but it's fascinating, the idea of how to engage. I don't know how my daughter was. I suck at math, and that was just the attitude coming into anything that was math. But so it's fascinating to hear about that idea about there's no wrong answers, just trying to get them to engage. Yeah, but I can see where the trick would be to get them to engage, but then also get them up to where they need to be for assessments. And then that's the mastery of the teachers. But as long as that curriculum supports that, that's pretty exciting.
Yep, it is. It's very exciting.
Is there any professional development offered with this
So because it's an open education resource, there isn't a company that owns the resource. There are online modules and webinars that we can set up and have teachers attend. We could, if we had a large enough group, which we can examine that, Kendall Hunt could send someone out, that publisher, but they're going to give a really canned PD that's similar to what their webinars are or their Zoom. And we had teachers go through some of those in the early in the fall, correct? As we were going through the pilot, they went through some of those. Because it's the OER, the Open Educational Resource, there isn't a company that will come out and do it. So there are resources for professional development. We're just going to have to be more creative in how we get teachers trained versus just having a company that will send out a representative.
Is the teachers that participated in those, did they find them helpful?
Yeah, everything that comes out by the company is very helpful, and they even have discussion boards and things like that other teachers join, and then teachers basically talk amongst themselves about what worked for you, what didn't work for you, how can I do this better, things like that.
And more of a community.
Yeah.
It's more of a kind of a community, so they get on these discussion boards and pose a question, well, how did you do this? And there becomes this answer response, so it's a little bit more of, you think about like those Facebook groups or things like that where they get on, just have those discussions and get that information.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I agree with Bill. We have little things that
Right.
That's great.
You want to talk about CPM?
Sure. Okay, so CPM actually is the one that has me the most excited. It is called College Preparatory Math, and the reason that we had to look at it is because there are not a lot of companies that publish things beyond Algebra 2, unless it's just a traditional textbook. And that's not what we wanted. We want to have our students exposed to real world problems, and how can we work together to solve these problems? And that is exactly what this curriculum is. And I've taught out of the book with 4 different classes this year, and the things my students can do because they use this curriculum just blows me away. It's very problem-based. It's not traditional at all. Basically, in a lesson, there's a bunch of questions and the kids are discovering the math with a little bit of help from me. Sometimes I don't have to help them at all. They get it figured out by the end. And then they have assignments where there's only 2 or 3 problems that deal with the lesson that day, and all the rest of the assignment spirals back for the whole rest of the year. So they're doing the lessons that we did back in August still today in April. I couldn't remember what month it was, I'm sorry. They're still doing that stuff in April, and so they haven't forgotten it because they've been in contact with it and using it every single day. And right now they're working on a huge project creating emojis with graphs. And so they have a little contest to see who can make the best emoji with using basically algebraic equations. And that'll be on display tomorrow at the Arts and Com Showcase if you want to come and check it out.
Appropriate emojis, right?
Oh yeah, I said it had to be school appropriate.
Any questions on CPM?
I was wondering what grade levels that was.
It's basically advanced algebra, which is a senior level class. Trig, which can be junior or senior. Honors Trig advanced algebra is 11th grade kids that just came out of honors algebra 2 usually. That's for the, and they do have a pre-calc series, but we kind of have to use what the college asks us to use. And their professional development is extensive because they want you to implement their curriculum with fidelity.
So the teachers have to go through it before you can actually teach it. So we had 3 staff members go through it this fall. There was two 3-hour online courses that they had to attend and take before they were allowed to access the online material and teach it. So that will be a prerequisite for those staff members to take that professional development.
And they were on board with that.
Yep.
Yeah, and they have even more, like after you get done with those 6 hours, you can do self-paced professional learning about the curriculum, and there is so much to learn about their curriculum.
Any last questions for us? We're very proud of the committee and the work that they put in. We feel like out of what was available, we got the gold standard, and we have everything that is needed to be successful with these 3 different companies. Really, the transition is 2 companies at that 6th to 7th grade mark between Eureka Squared and then IM. And then we feel like we've got the buy-in from the staff is very high on this. It was a unanimous vote on the elementary curriculum from all the team members that were there. We did have a little split in the middle school, but after some discussion, they all came to consensus that IM would be the best decision for us tonight. So we appreciate you guys' time and effort with this, and appreciate your opportunity to let us present today.
Well, thank you for all the time that you all have put into this. We really appreciate it. We're all
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We are ready for the foreign language curriculum adoption.
Okay, well, I'm Brittany Shields, Curriculum Instruction Coordinator, and I'm here for foreign language this time. Just a shout out to Katie is here with us. She is Spanish at Horace Hood, that's what she teaches, and she was on our committee, so she was involved and hopefully can save me if I have any questions that I can't answer. So similarly to what you've heard over these adoptions, we started with surveying all of the foreign language teachers, which is actually, we currently have 5 foreign language teachers, 2 at the middle schools that teach Spanish. We have 1 French teacher at the high school, and then 2 Spanish teachers at the high school. We currently have 1 unfilled Spanish position at the high schools. So we surveyed the staff, and they all agreed to give lots of feedback and be on our committee, so that was very helpful. In January we met and we decided on rubrics, what textbooks we wanted to look at, and then we had a presentation already from Vista in January. We had a couple other textbooks that we just reviewed online, Wayside and I think both of those were French. And then in March, we looked at another company and had a presentation for from Carnegie. And then in April, we made our recommendation and took it to Curriculum Council. And now here we are at the board meeting tonight. So our committee, like I said, was all of our teachers, and then we did talk with technology to make sure that what the textbooks were presenting were compatible with what we have technology-wise. What made this a lot of work for our teachers was we have sort of in Spanish, we have 2 tracks of Spanish, basically. We have if you are a native speaker, so somebody who speaks Spanish already, and then we have non-native speakers. So in 7th grade, you start out in Spanish class either in a native class or non-native. In 8th grade, I think due to scheduling mostly, they come together as Spanish B for native and non-native. And then when they get to the high school, they split again. So we have Spanish 1 through 4 native, Spanish 1 through 4 non-native, and we have an AP Spanish course as well at the high school. And then French, we have French 1 through 4. It's just for anybody. So we have to, those programs are very different. Their needs are very different. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, in the non-native, we're looking at how the language is structured, lots of vocabulary. When we get into our native speakers, we're looking more at writing, reading, culture, learning more that way. Any additions to that you want to add?
Yeah, so for the non-native speakers, we are doing kind of a different thing. where we focus on how they acquire language naturally, and kind of getting them to a point where they can actually do things with the language. Our native speakers were already there. They can already do things with the language. Now we're trying to get them to be more refined. Not only do we want them speaking it, but we also want them to be reading and writing. Literacy is one of our biggest goals when it comes to our native speakers, because a lot of them are coming from households where, yeah, they speak it with mom and dad, but could they write anything beyond maybe a few simple sentences? No. So the way that we do the native speaker is almost like an ELA class, but we're doing it in their native language. So it definitely presents different challenges, but it's a lot of fun. So
Great job. Okay, so we were able to find really everything we needed with one company, which our teachers teach multiple levels and native and non-native, so one system for the teachers and the students was important to them. And it just so happened that Vista was able to offer all of their needs. So you can see in middle school, we're kind of in the mindset of native speakers. We're gonna adopt Encuentros. At the high school is a different textbook, which is Perspectivas. First for our beginning level native speakers, and then our upper level native speakers, we're getting into another textbook called Galleria. And then we have our non-native series for our high school students, which is Senderos, which goes all 4 levels for that, and then French is one textbook for all 4. It's 4 levels, so the textbook is level for each course. So, and we really leaned heavily on their knowledge of what's expected in a world language course. We are asking also for a little bit of support for our middle school non-native speakers, so students who have really probably very limited exposure to Spanish. This is a program that Katie has been using in her class, and the middle school teacher, Mrs. Goitia at KH, would like to do the same. She's had good success with this. So we are asking for this curriculum for our non-native speakers, just at the middle school. This also comes with some grammar lessons, and Garbanzo is like text for them to.
So Garbanzo is like leveled texts that specifically focus on high frequency vocabulary, so that again they're understanding from the get-go, and they're able to do things with the language instead of just memorizing.
So the things that we really focused on as a committee were making sure that we were covering all the things that we need in our standards. Simple, again, one company makes, or almost all one company, makes things easier for our teachers. We had to think about our native and non-native, and that our technology works with all of this. So there are, we'll have physical textbooks, but then students will have online textbooks. Teachers have online access, can assign activities and tasks for them, and it all works through Google Classroom and iPads. So our technology department checked that out for us to make sure that worked. So, questions about foreign language?
I do have a question about the curriculum helping reach the goal of that biliteracy, opportunity. Does it, and I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the expectation is, other than what, it's been presented that they have the whole gamut. It's not just reading and writing or verbal, it's all of it. So does this curriculum help get us to that goal of increasing the numbers of kids that are able to get that biliteracy?
Our teachers at the high school are very involved, especially Mr. Perez, with the seal of biliteracy and getting that testing done on the students. I don't know, Monica, if you have anything to add about seal of biliteracy, but so he is very aware of what the needs are. And then we also have an AP Spanish course, which I think really supports that seal of biliteracy, and they utilize kind of the AP standards for that course. So they've worked really hard. That's where really why they are passionate about having our courses split into native and non-native, so that those native speakers can really focus on the skills they need to reach that goal of seal by literacy. So they did really think very hard about that.
Can I contribute a little bit to
Sure.
that as well? Another reason that I want to use the SOMOS and the Garbanzo and all of that stuff that really focuses on natural acquisition is because talking to our high school teachers, most of our students that end up taking the test for the seal of biliteracy are the kids that are already native speakers, which is great. That's wonderful. I love that we're able to push them to that point where they can use their language in that way. But part of why I want to boost our non-native speakers is because I would love to see some of our non-native speakers beginning to venture out and take that seal of biliteracy as well, and starting them out using the language on a regular basis and starting from the beginning of practicing what they can do with the language and making it useful. I'm hoping that as they continue to move through the Spanish curriculum, if they start out with that foundation of an understanding of how to actually use the language in a meaningful way, that we'll start to see more kids who are non-native speakers venture out to take that seal of biliteracy as well.
Any other suggestions? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all your work and bringing these to the board.
Stay up here.
So while we're doing this transition, I mean, on both of these, this is a first read for these curriculums, so we'll put these on the consent agenda for next time, unless you have a desire to talk more about them or questions. We can pull them off and do them as unfinished business items, but that's our kind of our normal process with these kind of things.
And I can't remember, I know we put a link to the social studies on our Facebook page. Did we do the math? I want to say I saw that the other day. And is the foreign language an option to also link up, so that way, I just feel like we kind of setting a little bit of a maybe precedence.
And the STEM, the Project Lead the Way STEM was there.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay. Stay up here for our social studies.
Social studies is next, so she's just seeing if you have any questions for her.
I'm just staying up here.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to social studies. Go for it.
Do you have questions that I can clarify or?
Or have any follow-up questions after examining social studies curriculum?
Are we talking about TCI?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I have a couple questions or a couple comments. So social studies obviously is a curriculum that deals with current events and changes. And thank you for emailing them and getting a response. Though I didn't find the response to be satisfactory, I would like to have a process. I'm good with the curriculum. I think it's a great curriculum. But I think there needs to be a process in place for our district when they are going to do an online update, that it goes to someone in the district to say, hey, we're going to make these changes, and then that process can come to the board. From my side of the table, it's really hard to say, I want to adopt a curriculum that's going to change without board input. You know, I mean, it's a big thing to adopt a curriculum, and to adopt one that's going to evolve over 5 years. I would just like to have a better process in place to say, hey, this is what's going to change. Yeah, board approves that change, doesn't approve that change, or that update.
You want me to clarify what the statement was that we got from them? I don't know, I guess you guys all got to read it.
I think you handed it out, didn't you?
Yeah, well, the statement that I clarified, if there were changes to the curriculum, do they notify us? How does that work? So did you guys get that communication? Oh, I guess you must have, John.
An email from Stephanie.
Yeah. So their statement is, to avoid disrupting teaching, planning, and classroom implementation, we avoid making major changes to the print-related materials mid-revision. However, we make edits to immediately fix any errors online, and those edits will be applied to future print editions. In addition, we periodically add online readings and resources throughout the life of the adoption. look for the Explorer, literature, biography, and primary source readings online, as well as the enhancing learning section in the planning box for every lesson. Online reference resources including our biography bank and citizen resources are also consistently updated. So what you're referring to is when they make those changes online, what's our process for reviewing those and bringing those to the board?
Correct.
I don't know that we've, in my experience, I don't know that we've had major changes to a curriculum, so I don't know.
I feel like we're probably in.
Something, because I teach social studies 7th grade. We haven't gotten any information about the curriculum changes. I haven't noticed any difference, and I student taught geography with the same TCI textbook that I've been teaching for the past 2 years. I haven't noticed any major changes. The only major changes I've noticed is sometimes they'll take words that are just kind of too big for like the middle school textbook and adjust it down to where they understand it a little bit better. I think it's a really good teaching and learning resource for the kids and the teachers. So.
I think if I just echo a little bit, if it's a resource, those don't always go through curriculum council or protocols or procedures because it's kind of an outside supplement to something they may teach. If the company is sending something to amend or change what's gone through curriculum council, then through the board, once we're notified of that, it would probably be prudent upon us to go back to curriculum council and provide those updates and get feedback from them before we start substantially distributing those. So without having it really written down, I think it would just be prudent upon ourselves that if they release saying we've added these resources to these classes, then we would just say at our next curriculum council, we'll put it on the agenda to review those items. And then if the curriculum council feels like it needs to be taken forward at that point in time for a further discussion, then they can proceed to kick it to the board for discussion, or if they feel like these are just replacing, a different supplemental resource that still has the same context, it hasn't changed the meaning of the assignment or anything, then we would just move it through curriculum council. And I'm just spitballing because there is nothing in our process. That would just be the prudent thing, I think, to do if there's this big change of additional resources that are available. And we would probably do that if Eureka Squared did the same thing for math. All of a sudden they send out, here's a massive update, we want you to change all of these assessments. And we'd probably take them through the process as well to just say, hey, let's look at these, let's make sure that this is still fitting what we purchased, so many years ago, and take it back through at least the curriculum council to get some feedback.
Well, I appreciate your comment, and I agree. I wholeheartedly think that curriculum's great. I just think as curriculums evolve and they do more online curriculums where they do push updates and they do stuff like that, we need to have a process in place to kind of have a little bit of a gatekeeper. What are we changing? Do our teachers know what's changing? Do they know how to teach it? Do we know what's going on with the updates opposed to just they're pushing them? So the process is what I'm after, and I appreciate your answer.
And we can formalize that into our next curriculum council handbook, which would go, before you guys in June, to just add that piece, so we can definitely do that as we update the handbook.
And that's not a bad idea as far as in response to the conversation. I'd encourage that.
Okay.
In your experience though, and maybe Glenda also, like with curriculum, are there significant changes that get made before they put another version or another edition, or, you know what I mean? Has that, even with the technology?
Yeah, and I'm going to agree because what I've noticed is they've noticed grammar errors in their text, and so they can't change it in the hard copy books that we've got, but they change it in the online resources so that they fix any edits that they probably should have got before it came out, but didn't. And so most of the changes that I've seen come through over the years have been those kinds of changes. I haven't seen great lessons changed kind of thing. So it's been more grammatical, or like you said, kind of the vocabulary or something like that.
I like the idea of having a process in place. I think it makes sense, especially with now the things in online. I just wanted to kind of get your feel for. Any other questions or comments regarding?
Does current events fall under this? Like if we have a current events class that falls under social studies?
Yeah.
How is that handled?
is happening to social issues class, that will be replaced next year with a world geography class. So there are current events connected to the, you just said the database.
Yeah, and whenever stuff happens, like we tie it into our curriculum as well. If like, for example, Ukraine, Russia, that was a big topic for geography this year. So it just kind of gets tied in with our own stuff. And like for me, I post everything in Google Classroom. Most teachers have a similar thing so that everyone does have access to that. Yeah.
USD does have an option for a current event class at the high school, but we currently haven't used it as a social studies elective.
So that would be an ongoing changing thing, right? To your point, I guess.
Yeah, and there really isn't, if you had a current events class, which in other buildings I've been in, you have one, there's not a curriculum to buy because it's usually CNN 10, or there is Scholastic News Now, those kind of resources that just puts out kind of a weekly report, and you use that to discuss the topics of the week. And sometimes they're just doing little writing scenarios or talking about the topics or following the Kansas legislature or things like that. So it would be very hard pressed for us to find like a hardbound or even a consumable textbook for current events. You just use those resources that are available.
Any questions, comments? Before we make a motion on this? Okay, then we need to have a motion to approve the social studies textbook adoption that was presented to the board.
I would so move.
Have a second? Okay, all in favor say any other discussion?
Can the process be tied to the motion that we put the process of evaluating that in the?
To have curriculum council do that? Is that something that we need to do with this, or should we ask that specifically of the curriculum council for? Because it wouldn't be just this textbook adoption, it would be all, right?
Yes.
It's a good point, but I would recommend that we pass this motion and that the staff simply take our wishes, because I think that was the thought process, is to consider some formalization of this discussion in the handbook for that committee, and I think that would address it. We almost get too much in the weeds, I think, if we try to throw it on this motion. That'd be my thought. That's good. Okay.
Are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same? Great, thank you.
Thank you for that, Virgin.
Yes. Okay, so we will move to the ESCO 5-school HVAC project and updated long-range facilities.
All right. So at the last meeting,
and then an overall project review of business finances. Next slide. My name is Josh Hansel. I'm the central regional sales leader for Honeywell. So me and my team, we cover 12 states, mostly the flyover states. So I flew in today from Wisconsin, and I've got to say Kansas is lovely because there's not a foot of snow on the ground. My background, I've been in the business since 2008. Been involved in almost 350 energy efficiency construction projects. Specifically with schools in Wisconsin, I've worked right around 100 in my tenure. So I've got a big passion for K-12 and some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. And this is Chris, who you've met before, our project manager on this potential project. So project recap, the scope includes 14 buildings of lighting upgrades, 5 buildings of HVAC upgrades, including our Honeywell Forge monitoring software. Minimal ongoing maintenance compared to the existing system. I'm a big fan of VRF. I've implemented a lot of them. I think it's a great technology, especially for older buildings with difficult infrastructure. You are implementing the newest technology. LED lighting, you're getting a ton more life cycle out of that product. Up to $100,000 for some of the product out there now, versus an existing T8 lamp, which is maybe $15,000 to $20,000. VRF, like I had mentioned, a great technology, and then again, cloud-based monitoring software. What that allows you to do is again better manage your HVAC operations and then occupant comfort. VRF, right now, if you have a 4-pipe system, which you do in the, 5 of these schools, it's either on or off. If one side of the building's hot when the sun's coming up, the 4-pipe system doesn't care. You can tailor it, to occupant comfort, which is, eventually leads to better student outcomes. Then improved indoor air quality, and then increased control of your buildings. You've got some data controls as well, I believe, the older Schneider product. You'll really be able to, again, dial in the learning atmosphere for your kids. The total construction timeline, assuming that the board moves forward, is 18 months. That was something Chris had put together. And Chris hasn't talked. Have you talked about your resume at all? You haven't. Why don't you give a little bit of background? Sure. The project managers, after this process is over, are really what make the project happen. And we've got a ton of fantastic project managers at Honeywell, and Chris is one of them. So.
I appreciate that. I'm part of the Honeywell operations team, so I have an opportunity after Josh's team and Sean's team have come up with the opportunity. They put the project together, and then it's turned over to our group to implement through the construction phase, and also the more important aspect beyond construction of turning over into the performance period, and that 20-year important relationship when those operational savings and energy savings are really happening and benefiting the district the most. So a little bit about me. I sit in the audience tonight envious. I spent three-year terms with the Green Valley, Missouri Board of Education. So well before COVID and many of the social issues today. So I think I had a lot easier than a lot of the things you all are facing today, but I appreciate and thank you for your service. Not near enough that happens. But I am about a 25-year person in this energy business on the operations side. So I enjoy working with our subcontractors. We'll have an opportunity maybe with some questions possibly to talk about some of the nuances of this project and some of the things that we've done to prepare ourselves to be successful right out of the starting gates, given the opportunity. So thank you for that time.
And then tying into a lot of the due diligence that Colleen's done, over the the course of a program like this, it's going to enable your district to upgrade other facilities by kind of shifting capital around and playing with house money, if you will. Because at the end of the day, these are dollars you're already spending because it is existing budgets. Next slide. So, the project cash flow highlights total project improvements of $17.7 million, a 20-year tax-exempt lease with Bank of America at 2.88%, which is one of the lowest rates I've seen in quite a while. I was shocked that it was under 3, quite frankly. But we did also solicit 7 local banks. Bank of America just happens to be the best with this offering in this kind of space. Just over $11 million in savings, supported by a performance guarantee throughout the 20-year term. And what that means is, Honeywell is taking the risk off of, the district's plate if there's a shortfall in those savings. So what those numbers actually mean, so $230,000 per year in energy savings, $183,000 annual operating savings. Total annual energy savings by percentage is 18%. And Honeywell performance support, the first year would be $56,000 of measurement verification, which is generally the toughest period because it is newer technology and a building that isn't used to this sort of system, so a lot of provisioning and commissioning need to be done. And then after year 1, then it would go down to $25,000 for the duration of the term. And the district is also dedicated $3 million in ESSER funds and $2.6 million in capital funds out of its budget. And that is, really just the short and quick of it. I was on calls all week with Colleen and your superintendent. It is a very, very nice project. It does the law does what it's supposed to do, and lending flexibility for you guys to do with your space what you want to do when it isn't always necessarily in the budget. So very common, and I definitely think at the end of the day you'll see an excess of savings, which has been my typical. Over the 100 or so districts I've worked with, we almost always exceed our expectations.
That was one of my questions, is when you say that the total annual energy savings is 18%, in the districts that you work with, is that the average? Is it around does that, sometimes you wanna see a bigger number in savings, but I'm wondering, but I don't know much about energy, so I'm wondering what's an average number when you work?
If you go to my home state of Wisconsin, that really depends if the school's air conditioned, who's taking care of the buildings, how they're being operated, the age of the assets. So for like Pittsville schools, which is in the dead center of Wisconsin, their cost per square foot was $1.02. If you go to Gillette schools, which is like 45 minutes north of Green Bay, their cost per square foot was $1.60. And the biggest variable, or the biggest delta between those two schools, even though they were almost like the exact same size and the exact same enrollment, was the person running the building. So it really, it's hard to benchmark that average because it depends on the existing infrastructure. And I'll give you another example. Northland Pines Schools, which is in Eagle River, they actually built twin elementary schools. So one in Land O'Lakes and then one in St. Germain. Identical equipment, identical runtime, but the difference was the person running the buildings. At the one in Land O'Lakes, their total energy spend was 20% higher. So it's very difficult to say, this is the average because of what you're implementing and what's existing, and then who's running the building.
But what I'm asking is like a project this size, so when you do a project this size for a district, is that an average type number of energy savings? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty fair in the 20% range. It would be real. Sometimes you'll see a big deviation. It'll be quite a bit more. But other times, let's say like if you're under ventilating a school, so things aren't running, you're not taking in outside air, then the cost per square foot could be a lot lower, but your CO2 levels are very high. So it really, all these variables play into it. But I would say for, the sort of facility director that you have, with his tenure and experience and the age of the, as a professional being in the space for this long, I would say that 20% range is probably average, given what I'm seeing for your scope of work and the age of your buildings.
I might just jump in and say, 20 to 30% is what I usually see on these type of projects.
Yes.
Another point to make is, 18% energy savings, think about it like an investment. Is there anything else you can invest in that you can get 18% back on your money? Doing energy projects like this are a huge return on your initial investment that you can't get anywhere else.
And Dane, I might add, the 18 is what's guaranteed. If we get 30, that's better for the district. It's just that delta would not be guaranteed. So it's not a surprise that they estimate conservatively. But Sean has kind of told us that through the whole process is that you most likely will see better than that.
Yeah, give it as an example, it was a Honeywell project implemented, again, Pittsville in 2014. We estimated $60,000 a year in energy savings, again, two buildings, much smaller district than this. And it came in at $89,000. That's a very conservative energy engineer because we don't really like to have a safety factor of about 10% built in, for, whatever, hours of operation changing and things like that. So generally, almost always the energy savings are exceeded.
And that's a little bit by design.
Yeah.
The conservative numbers aren't intended to be misleading in any way. It just makes banks feel better and corporations offering guarantees feel better. And it gives us the opportunity to even be a bit more aggressive in looking for other savings opportunities. Here's an example with regard to like the operational savings. Based on the scope of the projects that we intend to execute, the lighting and HVAC, the district had already begun some lighting upgrades and some other lighting retrofits. Those operational savings had never been captured, for example. So we were able to incorporate those numbers into this project to make those savings numbers even a bit more robust and for us to feel even more confident and comfortable that what we're presenting to you is again conservative but very accurate and very achievable.
Yeah, over the course of the billions of dollars we saved our clients, anything from like Tinker Air Force Base for like $280 million, our shortfalls are less than 1% of the time on projects. It's very, very rare because of the the arduous process it has to go through and the number of reviews that are done. So when we put a number on the table, we're very confident we can hit that number.
What about your your initial number, you know, the 17.7 million. I read through the contract, there's a lot of areas in the contract where costs could exceed, costs could go up. How close do you typically run to your estimated project cost?
In my experience, implementing projects with Honeywell, I almost always have money left over. But that's also 10 years ago when, you know, there were 1% increases in material, you know, labor was pretty flat, energy was pretty flat. You know, if inflationary pressures hit your energy budget, you know, that delta changes and you're actually gonna save more because you're reducing that base load. But like cost overruns, if you have a good project manager, it's rare. As long as everything is, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, then you trust your subcontractors. You know, in my experience, there are no change orders. You know, if we make an honest mistake, you know, then we own that. If a performance contract is our goal, it's a not to exceed number with a guaranteed energy savings. So, I can just speak to my experience, but that is the industry trend. That's really what we pride ourselves on. We're a general contractor that guarantees energy savings. Is really, I mean, the way to think about it.
It does touch on a point that, unfortunately, with the volatility of some of the markets that we're dealing with, supply chain issues, commodities pricing issues, our subcontractors put very short time limits on the bids that they provide to us. And so, for example, one of the bids that we have expires on May 1st. So we're hopeful that with the board's consideration and possible favorable movement on the matter tonight, that would allow us to immediately begin to work with Dr. Carl and his team to preserve the pricing that we have and not be right here at the very beginning with a possible cost concern or any pricing increases to try and avoid.
And another reason I really like DRF right now is because you can actually get the product. Not only is it probably the best solution, you know, per Sean's design, but like right now, if you order like an air-cooled chiller, you know, which is what you guys have on your roofs now, you know, provide cooling for your schools. It's like 24 months almost before you'd even get, you know, a piece of equipment, and then you'd have to install and repipe and do all those things, which would be probably like another, 18 months potentially. So, that's another consideration too with this solution. Like you're gonna get a better project sooner, so you'll start saving more energy sooner.
That was a question I had for you. So are all of our boilers and chillers on all 5 buildings identical?
Not identical, but very, very similar.
Could they be interchanged?
No, what do you mean?
As an example, say you chose, instead of doing the scope of the whole project, you choose to do one building, and then you can take the boiler and the chiller from the one building and use that in your warehouse as spare parts for other buildings as you change out over time?
No, they would not be identical, and those boilers, they're built inside that room, so once they come out, they're coming out in pieces.
You're turning them down.
Yeah.
And all of that equipment is well past their expected service life.
Are they past the ASHRAE useful life? Most
Yeah,
of them? Are they okay?
they're all over 25 years old.
But they're not identical.
Yeah.
The same. Some of them may be the same, 2 or 3 of them may be, but probably not.
Any other questions or comments? So we are wanting to,
One comment, I'm pleasantly surprised with the interest rate.
Yeah,
And it's tax-free offering, and so that really helps.
That's another advantage of a company the size of Honeywell, because we have been doing this since roughly 1985. That when a bank, like Bank of America, because we hold that liability, when Bank of America looks at, like our portfolio or our balance sheet, it makes a difference, sometimes up to, 25 or 50 basis points. So, because we work with them all the time on large projects like this. So, that's part of working with our structured finance team, who Colleen's talked to, quite a bit. So it's, that's for all the, rate increases that have come through, especially on the consumer side. When I saw sub 3, I was like, wow, that's awesome.
Oh.
Yeah.
And your last meeting presentation, you said you probably could beat the 3%.
Yeah, we were hoping for like 3.5, 3.25, and then when they came back at sub 3, I was like, wow, that's a win. And it made the cash flow look better, which she's going to talk about. So your your capital, they went down a little bit, didn't they, Colleen?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, there's another one.
So are we waiting on a presentation from College on
Yeah, she's gonna show you the cash flow on,
Okay.
that we presented to you 2 weeks ago, with the updated information.
I have one more question, it may be more for Colleen, but maybe you guys can help answer. So we had a brief meeting here a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, you guys kind of introduced us to the initial project. I asked at that time how much of the savings was electrical, what was the lighting, and what cost of that versus what was the cost of the heating and air, and what was the return on that, and I never received any information back on that, like to separate the projects opposed to putting them together. Does anybody have an answer for as far as what the investment for the lighting is and what the return is, or the savings is on that versus the heating and air?
Yeah. So,
Is that, do you wanna go over that return?
yeah, sure, so, go ahead, I'm sorry, I'm late, getting off the plane today. So, here's your total electric spend for all 14 buildings. Energy and operational broke down. Right here. An email broke up the column.
Choose the bottom one.
Is that something we need to print off, John, or?
I think it'd be valuable for the board to see it if they're gonna make a decision.
Stephanie, can we get a copies of those? Is that printable?
Yep, hold on just a minute.
So were you looking for the split of mechanical, electrical on that 17.7 million? Okay.
And the savings that is associated with the
So
lighting side.
just roughly off the top of my head, I think it's what, about 3 million cost for the electrical side and 12 million or so on the mechanical side, but 2/3 of our savings comes from the electrical and 1/3 of it comes from the mechanical. So it costs a lot more to do mechanical. There's not as big a ROI on the mechanical, but there's a huge ROI on the electrical lighting, which is what helps pay for the whole project.
Yeah, well, lighting generally carries these things. I mean, like, we did a project for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Yeah, again, the ratio is almost always the same. It was almost a $60 million project. And the numbers are almost always, the same, the cost per square foot, right? Because it's such a big load reduction and not as much capital input, because light bulbs are a lot cheaper than HVAC equipment. And the HVAC consumes, quite a bit more.
So projects are typically done in this fashion? or they
Always,
do-
yeah. Always, like the only thing that the only measure that this particular project is really missing would be some, cogeneration, like solar or
Hard up there.
biomass or something like that.
Okay.
When lighting's already done, normally then the biomass will, depending on the scenario, will carry the rest of the project.
It's like if you just did the HVAC and you're a little over 12 million, you're only gonna see maybe 2.8 to $3 million worth of savings on the HVAC. So you'd have to come up with that other 9 million. But by putting in the lighting side of it, now you're gaining almost all that back and you're only spending a little bit.
Can you repeat your numbers?
Yeah, and again, I don't know the exact numbers here, but I think we're around a little over 3 million for lighting and a little over 12 to 13 million for the HVAC portion. And then out of our 10 million, 11 million savings, 2/3 of that is from the lighting and 1/3 of that is from the HVAC.
But based on the current agreement, it could go up, 17 could go up.
There'll be some positive deviation, has been my experience, yes. Because there's a safety factor built in, John really hammered down on the hours, to make sure that, that your hours of operation were buttoned up. But yeah, there will be a positive deviation typically. Again, like I explained, like Pittsville, it was up almost, $30,000 and a $60,000 spend. That was just a very conservative energy engineer, and also a really conservative superintendent. He didn't want to take a chance, with his political future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
No, yeah, that was.
No. I thought you were talking about savings. No, the 17.7 is set in stone. Yeah. No, it won't. So I thought she was going back to savings because that's what you're talking about.
If anything, we may see that that's too much and we have money left over that can be applied back.
Yeah.
And a note that we would have, if we have extra savings, we prepay.
Yes, you can prepay with the.
Yes.
Yeah, so some of those costs, I'm sorry, through the change orders would make that go up, but we're not gonna have any change orders on this. Sean has designed this appropriately for these buildings, and we're gonna keep an eye on everything that's going on. I mean, we're gonna keep a good eye on the installation and what's going in, and so we're confident that there's not gonna be any increase in this price moving forward.
And part of this process is a detailed audit that Honeywell has done and ICE has been involved with really over probably the course of over a year of gathering information. So that's why they're able to come up with a very specific number. So they've looked at all the lighting in the district. They've extensively looked at these buildings. We've written up specifications for those buildings. So the change order would likely happen if we ended up building on a classroom in the next 15 months and we've got more space to cover.
Yeah, if you change the scope.
Added something to the project.
If you add something to the project, yeah, but the number's the number. It's not gonna go, but not to exceed number. That's the reason that companies like ours are around.
One of the reasons I feel really good about this process, first of all, in addressing our needs, is all of that pre-study that's been done, and even an audit before, where we identified a building or two where there was the afternoon CO2 problem.
Sure.
That's all been addressed, and we've got good environments, and this is going to help us keep really good environments for our teachers and our learning.
I think it will actually improve the environments, because like you said, when, you can't, with what we have now, you can't, have different, I'm not gonna articulate it well in your language, but from what you said, it sounds like it gives more individuality in terms of, space and, comfort levels.
Yeah, and the work we've done to the envelope of the building, the outside, sealing up all the cracks and the pour paint on the outside and the windows are gonna help these buildings maintain the temperature to where it's not gonna get out of whack when we go to set it back in the evening and weekends and holidays.
Thank you all very much.
And I know you were kind of asking about the percent savings, so there on the bottom of that email, it says the percent of savings energy, 18% operational, 15 for total savings of 13%. Just put that out. And then the print, we cut off the table, so I'll pass on the original email so you guys can see all of the information since it kind of cut off a little bit, so we have it all. What I was gonna show you guys today was a long-range facilities plan. So the only changes on this spreadsheet was the capital for ESCO. So the last time we came in here, we had the first payment coming out in 2023 of $345,000. Since the interest rate came in at that 2.883%, it's now updated, and then our first payment won't be until 18 months after the project begins. So the first payment won't be until 2024. We did recapture approximately $115,000 worth of savings that we would receive from the LA
in 2024, their initial capital payment for ESCO will be $288,069, and then it'll slightly increase throughout the years. You can see it goes up to $329 here in 2028. Then as you scroll over, it increases slightly from there, with ending at approximately $332,500 after 20 years. So that's the increase in capital payment there for the next 20 years. So those were the only numbers that changed. Feel pretty good about that. Interest rate is at 2.883%. So pretty fortunate to have that. Any questions on how this fits into the long range plan?
Were you gonna talk about that measurement verification piece?
Yes.
So, was it on your thing to talk about next, or can I summarize it?
You can start and then I'll fill in, because I
Okay.
gotta bring up my notes.
Okay, so, about 56,000 is included in the project the first year for measurement and verification. So that's where Honeywell basically makes sure that these systems are realizing the savings that we anticipate. And if we don't get that savings, then they make up the difference by writing us a check. Then the following year, I think that goes down to 25,000, and it's maybe goes up a little bit, but in that range for every year for the remaining 20 years. It's not out of the ordinary for some organizations to only do that for 3 or 4 years. But we structured the agreement to where we can do it every year for all 20 if we want to make sure that they're on the hook to write that check. But if 4 or 5 years down the road, the district is realizing great savings and we no longer feel the guaranteed savings is important, we can forego paying that 25,000 and kind of take that over ourselves and save that money and use that money to pay things off early. There's no penalty for stopping that. It just becomes something that, and that will be totally at the district's discretion. So we built it in there in case we want to keep it, so kind of an ultra conservative approach. But if down the road you decide, hey, they told us 18%, but man, we're saving close to 30, and we don't think that them checking on that and monitoring that with us every year is that important anymore, you'll have that option. The district will have that option in the future. Did I summarize that?
Yeah, it typically, nationally what we see is about 4 years. Unless the only time you don't see that is like in Wisconsin, because they can go out and levy, without even having to go to referendum. The Department of Public Instruction there makes them report out until the debt is satisfied. But in almost every other state, it's about 4 years, and that's between all local jurisdictions, whether it's cities or school districts or universities. So that's very, very common, and that's why we structured it that way. Trying to be upfront with the district.
Very logical.
Any other questions by the board for discussion?
I guess I would like to table this until we get some more of the information that was presented tonight as far as the savings and different things like that, before we make a motion.
What other savings? What
The
other
rest of this
savings?
information and the graph cut off. So I would just like to have all the data to make a good decision. 17.7 million is a lot of money to leverage on the district. We have a new superintendent. John is retiring. There's a lot of changes going in to our administration as well as putting this plan in. So I would like to have all the information before we approve it.
Could I ask a question? John, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well. You were citing additional information plus transition of the new superintendent and.
I'm somewhat concerned about that. As John had mentioned to us, there was a project kind of going on when he obviously have a new person coming in, the new superintendent coming in. Those are a couple of my concerns. They're not huge concerns as much as I'd just like some time to review the data before we make that decision.
Okay, and I just want to point out, and I know you're all over this, John, but just as far as a public dialogue, this is really brick and mortar stuff. It does affect the financing of the, I mean, it's obviously a financial element or strategy of the district, but in order to accomplish what we're gonna have to do, as far as, upkeep to our buildings. And so it's, to me, I've settled out that this is not something we necessarily have to delay for the new superintendent. This is really us as a board taking care of the assets of the community, and how are we gonna do that and provide that environment for the teachers. So with that said, there's just an element, you never wanna feel rushed into anything, but this is really a culmination of a long process and of evaluation and how do we finance it, and with this presentation for the finances doesn't necessarily go away, but there's some time constraints on some things like locking in the interest rate, and how's that gonna change? There's sort of a question there to the team. And then how much, is this to the next meeting, and therefore what kind of time frame does the bank have to come up with on a new bid?
Sean, could you answer that question?
Yeah, I know. I'll speak to all of our bids from the contractors and stuff will expire here at the end of the month. So if we don't get approval by then, what I'm hearing from them is you're probably looking at about a 10 to 15% increase over that 17.7 million if we wait another week, because that's just the volatility in the construction market right now is crazy. We've had to get equipment vendors to try and hold their price, even though they've already had price increases, but they've been willing to do that to try to keep it at that same price. But contractors, they're not really doing much of that. So as far as the interest rate, sub 3 was fantastic. I haven't seen that, like I said, in a long time. I'm afraid if we don't lock that in, we're going to see over 3%. Then you're going to see those capital payments that are going to increase by that $45,000 or $50,000 again per year.
My other question is, because the large amount of ESSER funds directed at this project at this point, what happens if we have to try and redirect that? I know some of that is time limited and those proposals have to be submitted. Is that a concern as well with this particular project?
You've got till 2024 to spend those, so this project would be done.
Yeah, it'll be done by then. And
you probably have a little more room with spending those dollars. But I would say your immediate issues are the cost of the project will likely go up, and your interest rates will, I think the interest rates are locked until June 1st, but the contractor pricing is only until
May 1st.
What I meant by that though is, this is where you're directing some of those ESSER funds. If we don't direct those ESSER funds to this, do we have something else that large sum of money, are there other plans that money would be used for, or?
There are not at this time, but there could be. Again, you have till September of 2024 to have those spent.
Okay,
So
there's nothing on the back burner, another, something that's.
Plan B.
Right.
we want to, with those 3 buckets, a bucket to, 15%, I think we said 10 to 20% to infrastructure, 10 to 20% for code-related support, and 60 to 70% to instruction things. So, but there's no reason that couldn't change.
And this proposal was also given to the long-range facilities plan, or committee, long-range facilities committee?
Yes.
In your opinion, how long would we have if we didn't do this until we have to replace some of those we're forced to replace them?
One of the schools are due like last year. We're getting by. They, like Sean said, these units are they've exceeded their limits on their runtime. that's always an option, just keep replaced. If that chiller goes down and we've got to wait 24 months to get a new chiller, then we're gonna have to get one trucked in on a trailer and have it rented on a weekly basis from Train, and that's gonna be astronomical.
About $20,000 a month for air-cooled chiller rental.
So those are some of the things that we're gonna be looking at. Failures in the middle of the school year. Or nothing could happen. Everything could just work just fine for another 50 years. I don't think that's gonna happen. Yeah, that's probably not gonna happen, but that's where we're at. These things they're putting us at an uneasy feeling of what's gonna happen when they fail, and hopefully not at the same time. And I'm not trying to scare anybody into making a decision, but yeah, this is a good option for the district to keep them on that schedule to get things replaced in a timely manner. And it's, like I say, it's just an option, so.
How many of the bids expire May 1? Because I heard one person say most of them, and then earlier I heard one of them.
So all the subcontractor and contractor bids all expire May 1st. Bank of America financing to be locked in is June 1st. So it's just your financing versus your contractors for the work. And you would expect that those contractors, that's the percentage that we'd expect to go up at least 10 to 15% after that May 1st.
On the long-range facilities plan that you gave, I think all of the board, and it may have been the last meeting or maybe the meetings, the smaller meetings, it kind of lays out exactly the years that those systems were planned to be replaced, right? Like just as we do that for the long-range facilities, are all of these 5 buildings, like could you guesstimate like how far out they were planned initially?
Within 5 years, I think,
Okay.
they were all in an order.
In the next 5 years?
Uh-huh.
Okay. We would have went through each of these.
Yeah, each year I was just planning on doing a chiller boiler, on that plan. Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's important in that conversation is originally we planned just to replace the chillers and boilers. We have learned that the systems really need more than that, and replacing that piping in the system is gonna be disruptive to using that building for school, if I understand it.
With that kind of system, when we have to take it offline, that takes the whole school down. So you're gonna be, and that's gonna be longer than 3 months in a summer to do a full pipe system like what you have. Probably look
Plus
about
the
4 to 6
ducting
months.
was the wrong size.
Right, all the
So
duct
that
work
has
from the
to-
air handlers back to each classroom has to be replaced as well. And then the individual control units in each classroom also have to be replaced.
And I believe it was more expensive considerably.
About $20 million total compared to the 17.7 million, or it was 23 million. 23 million, it's about $6 million more.
For me, John, I just don't feel like there's enough reason, like in terms of the data that you're wanting to look at, which is the percentages between the electrical and the HVAC systems and the ROI on them. It's like, I feel like they presented what that might look like. I just don't feel like there's enough information that we don't have. I feel like we've been given a really comprehensive plan, and I do worry about the expiration of some of these things, and it's passed through enough professional plans, and I feel like John, being the professional, like, has brought this to us before he leaves, so that way, you know, we're setting ourselves up for like a good, like, I don't want somebody brand new coming in and then not being familiar with what we do have and what we do need, because that will take time. I mean, we're a big district, so that's where I'm at. I feel like we've been given plenty of information, and I don't really wanna put this out. I get to, I mean, 17 million is huge, and so you definitely wanna be comfortable. I don't wanna rush you into that, but I feel confident.
I just want all the data because, I mean, with the data that I asked for 2 weeks ago that I got tonight, this is just hypothetical, but we could take our ESSER funds and pay for our lighting. And if we get 2/3 of the savings, that's $6 million. That's half of the other projects paid for without doing one.
But then we're like taking a risk on all the HVACs, and it seemed like in the end game for without the ESCO project, it seemed like we're paying more in the long
The whole reason for the project is to replace the failing HVAC system. We can get there by doing the lighting and capturing that savings.
I'm just saying
You can't do that by the end of it.
I would like to have time to review the numbers, to there may be a different way to get to that would save the district more money.
But how would we do that? Like hiring another professional to see if we can get better numbers or pay for half, or I don't understand how we'll get there.
I would just like the time to go through the numbers.
The numbers that were just given to us
The
tonight.
numbers we asked for 2 weeks ago that we just got ballpark tonight, I would like actual numbers to see the review.
Anybody else?
I'm not saying we want to never doing this way, Dana. I just want all the data before I spend $17.7 million.
I'm just saying that they provided us with what you're asking for is the return on investment, right? Like, so and they like told us that, yes, the electrical is where you get all your savings versus the HVACs, but, so I'm trying to figure out, I don't know what other data that we need to, my fear is that when do you think we can approve this and not miss out on the thing? I get wanting to review the numbers, and I understand that, but when then do we come back and approve this, and do we cost ourselves more? Is it worth the time and the cost?
I can make a decision pretty quick if I get the numbers, but I didn't get them. I asked 2 weeks ago and didn't get them. I can't vote for it without doing my due diligence.
Is there a way we could get the data and still vote by papers?
Have a special meeting.
It's a lot of money. I would want all of us to be on board with it. But I agree, there's an urgency that we really, we're gonna do it. So if we could get the numbers and then meet before May 1st, so we don't miss out if we do it, that's what I would. Perfect.
That might be, I mean, that would be, I feel the urgency too, and rather than vote and just him have to vote no, others vote yea, and we still don't know. Maybe we think in terms of taking a little bit more time, if you guys are open to a special meeting.
May 1st is Sunday, so we'd have to make a decision by Friday.
This Friday?
Apologize for interrupting your discussion a little bit. One of the things that's part of this timing of this process is the internal things that occurs within Honeywell for us to finish vetting our subs, getting them entered into our accounting systems, generating subcontract documents and things like that. The similar types of contract packages that you all have had to review are very similar types of contract packages that we send to our subcontractors. So unfortunately, the closer we get to that May 1st date for approval, unfortunately, the more risk we seem to run. And I apologize for appearing that I'm lobbying for this to be right now tonight.
It's just a time constraint.
Unfortunately, we're just kind of up against some real hard and fixed time constraints that just aren't cooperating with the idea of postponing things, unfortunately, very much longer.
If this was 3 or 4 years ago, and there wasn't the wildness there is and all the volatility in the market, I would side with John. Again, that's the reason I flew down here, was to try to be an advocate and talk about my professional experience, and hopefully I portray myself in a professional manner. But the $230,000 in energy savings, that's the number that's guaranteed. Over the 20 years, it's not going to change. But what is going to change is, I've had some customers take some really big upcharges, in the public sector by waiting. Like Iron County up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It was a smaller branch side project, not a pure energy project, but it was still, it was relief dollars, and it went up last summer. I mean, like almost 18 or 19%, because it was mostly equipment, coming out of the factory, and they missed the deadline, and it skyrocketed because of the cost of materials, and then also demand, because there's so many dollars floating out there. So I mean, I'm just just giving my experience, what I've seen with other jurisdictions across the country, and it's the reality of the world we live in right now.
How long do subcontractors bids, so do they typically give, I'm assuming just like a 30-day, even that?
30 days of that, like a control project that I had, again, last summer for another little jurisdiction up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Our electrical stuff went from, it was a smaller building, but again, it was all, relief dollars. It went from $60,000 a hard budget, up to 90, because of the increases on copper. It's just everything's jumping up so fast, just like used cars. It's purely supply and demand.
So here's my question, we have a few days to submit a special meeting, right? No, we can do that anytime.
As long as you agree.
Because I do think, honestly, in thinking of us, you do set a precedence. When a board member asks for information and doesn't get it, like it's detrimental to decision making, because every board member wants to feel confident with the decision that they make at the end of the day. So I understand where you're coming from. If we don't get the research and we don't have the data, it's extremely hard. This is a decision that has to be made this week, is what I feel, is what you're saying, right? In the next couple of days.
Actually, tonight, if it's possible.
So we don't even have a day,
I wish we
24
had.
hours.
I wish I could say that we did, and I'm so sorry that I don't. It does unfortunately impact our ability to get all of our documents to our folks in time for the expiration of the bids and things like that. And maybe a little bit of background. We have had the bids from our contractors since their bid due date was March 25th. So we've been behind the scenes working to put numbers together, and we have one of the bids that actually expired the 24th, in just a couple of days, or actually yesterday, excuse me. We were able to get it extended just a few more days to the 1st in effort with respect to the board's activities or possible activities this evening. So, and again, I apologize for the rather pressured nature of this, but if we don't do it tonight, I certainly respect that. We'll need to retool what the pricing structure of the project looks like, possible interest rate impact, but we know we'll have a subcontractor impact if we're not able to move forward this evening.
Okay, so that boils money.
We were going to have possible another board member join us later.
Yeah, Jennifer said she's gonna come.
What time?
But we have to have 4 votes to move anything. And as sharp as John is in numbers, and I'm really anxious to see what you come up with, I feel that urgency to put something on the table. But I hate to put something on the table if it's going to fail, particularly with as much work as gone into this. I also don't know whether we're going to have a 5th board, a 6th board member show up.
So I work for you guys, not for Honeywell, so if there's anything you want to ask me, I mean, I will try to give you anything that I can.
Are a lot of schools doing this level, like 5? Is this a lot of schools are doing? They couple it with electrical
A lot of districts, when they do an energy project, they usually touch every school. So, I mean, this is really kind of a scaled down energy project compared to what most of these are that we do.
But they usually couple the electric and the
Oh, yeah, because it's the only way you can pay for the project is the electrical. Mechanical systems just don't have that payback. They don't have that return on investment. I've done tons of these projects for districts all over the country, and on the consultant side, besides just being an engineer, I worked for Train ESCO for a long time as well, and did them on that side too. So I've seen both sides of it. I'm a board member as well in my district, and I mean, we bring a project like this to my board, nobody's gonna know what's going on. They're gonna ask me because I'm the only one that knows anything about, buildings and stuff like that. So it's a commitment, but it's also a guarantee that you're not gonna not make your money. So if anything happens, you're not gonna be out any more money. And, $17.7 million project, over $11 million of that is pure savings that you're gonna get off of it. That's that guarantee. So it's really a great financial vehicle to get this kind of work done. And sometimes this kind of stuff doesn't work. I mean, you don't have that energy savings. It just so happens that this is a culmination of we've really been looking at this for years. Back when John first started, I worked for Train when we looked at the whole ESCO project at that time. I'm glad we waited because we found out a whole lot more about these buildings after John had us go through a commissioning process than we knew back then. And we probably wouldn't have picked up, it wouldn't have been picked up that all these other issues that was in those buildings.
Yeah, and so the lighting, the energy savings and the lighting, that's a given. I mean, that's the one that we are 100% confident of. Changing out these light bulbs from this wattage to this wattage, we're gonna see those savings. The HVAC savings is that's what's vulnerable. I guess I'll say, and that's what how we run the buildings is going to determine that down to their estimates and the run times and the comeback of the building. So, and we're not gonna. That's just what's the variable that we don't know what it's going to be to give you that exact amount. Because if they tell us that we need to shut these buildings down at 6 o'clock and we still got activities going on in these buildings, and it makes sense to us for the occupants of the building to run that system longer for the occupants, we're going to do that. And so that's why it's going to be hard for them to give an exact number on the savings for the HVAC, but the lighting side of it, that's cut and dry. That's going to happen. That's the given that we're very confident that we're going to see that.
But even the HVAC savings would still be within the safety factor, So I mean, so there's some wiggle room there. And when we sent that email over with percentages, which is that's not listed in our contract. The actual total dollars are in exhibits in our contract that are broken out for electrical. And I should have mentioned this earlier, and for HVAC. So those dollars are broken out by facility improvement measure. But they're just not listed as percentages. They're listed as KWH, and then hard dollars for the guarantee plus the escalation rate that you see in her cash flows. So if we sent the final contract over earlier in the week, and then we made some tweaks with John for some hours. But if all the board members got contracts as part of your packet last Friday, which we had sent over around noon, I mean those dollars are in there, if that's what your concern is. So it was sent over with our final version.
$7 like percent savings or whatever. I didn't see the total. I guess for buying versus.
There's charts in there that are broken out.
It's all broken out by exhibit. It's all broken out by technology, including the entire scope of work line by line. Every floor, every door, every classroom, every closet. What's existing, what's proposed, what's the run time. Some of those hours, there's no change in there because there's no hours. So why would you, replace something that's never on?
Some of these figures also in the cash flow statement that was sent on Friday. Towards the bottom of the cash flow, there is the breakdown of energy versus construction, operating and capital contribution savings. And then the performance assurance debit fee. All of those numbers are also in that spreadsheet, so it shows the energy savings and then operational savings over the next 20 years too.
Well, one thing we can do is move forward. And we do that with actions, so just put something on the table.
I think there's two things that have to happen if the board wants to proceed with this. You need a motion to probably approve the ESCO project and the long range facilities plan. And then there's a resolution that was provided that the board will need to approve if you decide to proceed. That has to be approved tonight, correct, Holly?
Yes, sir.
And then there will be another resolution that has to be approved at the May 9th meeting. Is that correct?
It will be the legal counsel opinion letter that would be approved May 9th for the sales lease purchase.
And I might add that, there's a lot that has gone on with this, and John, I apologize if you didn't have the information that you needed here. I wasn't aware that you were still waiting on that or that you didn't get your questions resolved that day. But we have spent a lot of time going back and forth with the board's counsel, reviewing contracts, making sure everything's good. And I know even as of Friday, there was just a ton of things that we were trying to get together and get to people, but in all the bounces back and forth, some of the stuff wasn't as ready as soon as any of us would have liked it. So, but Jennifer has reviewed everything and has indicated she's comfortable with the language, including the resolution that you're looking at here.
Can this be made in one motion to approve as presented and adopt the resolution?
I think probably.
Well, then I so move.
Can the chair second?
Sure.
Because I feel like we have to have a vote, because if we don't have a vote and we table anything, then essentially we have to get a whole new proposal in meetings, right? There's no waiting, I mean, there's no, leeway to wait, so if we table it, which obviously if that's the majority of the board or the will of the board, then I think we're looking at a different proposal, so I feel like we should at least vote on this one or put it to a vote, and then, obviously if it doesn't pass, then we're open to look at a different proposal, because that's what it sounds like it would be, right? It would be a different proposal at that point.
It'd be the same scope of work, but with associated price increases.
Right, exactly. So for us, it would be different, I mean,
So you seconded?
yeah, if I can, I'll second it. No, any further discussion? John, do you wanna put anything else out there? Or Jackie? Jackie, do you want to make it?
I feel the urgency. I mean, I just know in my line of work, they aren't even guaranteeing warranties on equipment for any period of time because with a price lock, because it changes daily.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and, vote. All in favor of approving this, what should I call it?
The motion
The
was
motion,
to.
including the resolution, okay. Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Did we get four? All right, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for reports.
I just said, John, I regret it, we'll do it that way, because that information, we'll just have to work harder on making sure we get it.
Okay, so, our final, point on unfinished business is discussion of the board vacancy. I believe we were presented with a number of different options, on Friday. It's in this packet, is it in this packet?
So you may know.
Yeah, it was in the Friday packet of information. Does anybody wanna start with, discussion on that, your thoughts, or suggestions?
Well, just in review, if I recall it correctly, the last two times that this board, this body has been in this situation, we went back to the next highest vote getter. And then there was also a description, an earlier board, a number of years ago, took the approach, in this circumstance to basically solicit interest from past school board people in the community who had served on the school. And then, is there another example?
I think just, in visiting with KSB and other superintendents, there have been, examples where an application was sent out, either a written application or, people who gave names did interviews with the board. knowing that those interviews have to happen in open session, that there was a process whereby people could submit their names and either complete that written application with questions. But when I say application, I mean it might be a handful of questions that the board would want the prospective board member to answer, or those questions might be asked in an interview style.
So we could submit that, like, application type thing, and then discuss amongst the board and not have to do a formal interview, because it's an application?
Yeah, if you did it, an application's maybe a bad word, maybe questions in writing, that someone could complete. And then the problem with an interview is, since it has to be in an open session, if you have 5 people who are interested, the last one to interview can come in and sit and listen to the first 4 people's responses. And so there becomes this question of fairness, and you need to ask the same questions of all your potential candidates. So maybe an advantage in writing is you could set a date where those would be kept sealed until a certain time, and then the board could review them. They would become public. Those documents would be available to the public, that then the board could make a selection.
So the due date that we'd have for those to open, that would be the date of our meeting.
Could be, as long as you open them all at the same time.
Yeah, so we're not protected, so it all is done in open session. In that scenario.
Reviewing the applications is done in open session?
Well,
No.
discussing the candidates.
Oh, just in discussion.
Yeah.
So we would each get those individually, we would review them, and then we have an open discussion here, or we could select, like at an executive, and then have discussion about that selection process, or no?
Well, you don't have a basis for executive sessions, the challenge.
Yes, okay.
Because you don't have, non-elected personnel. This would be treated as
Right.
elected.
If you did some kind of a written question and response, once, those could be due back, they could be provided to board members a couple of days ahead of a meeting. Again, they would be available to the public at that point as well. But then you don't have to discuss every one of them in a meeting. One board member could make a motion after you've reviewed it, and if that gets a second and that person gets 4 votes, then without any discussion, you could appoint that person. Or you may want to choose to discuss. You certainly can do that.
Does anybody have something they're feeling strongly about in terms of the direction we should go in filling the open position?
I like the idea of the application and the questionnaire.
I do too, that would be my choice.
But I know we had several that expressed interest previous. They would need to redo that, and maybe additional, and also.
Yeah, I would suggest if you decide to do some kind of a written questionnaire, that you put that out there publicly, you approve that approach, and then you put a time limit out there, a week or 2 weeks, and ask people who are interested in applying, being considered, to contact Stephanie. We can contact the ones who have already contacted us and make sure they know, but then it's out there, and then a couple of you could get together and generate the questions that you want to have, and we could put that together, and those could be the questions that go out, and then the rest of the board could.
And it could be put out multiple pages.
Absolutely.
Does anybody not favor that direction? Mark?
Sounds,
John? So, do we have to vote on that? Is it a formal vote, or just a?
I think maybe you want to formalize that a little bit, because there's obviously some interest to that. So if you want to think about a timeline,
opportunity. You missed the meeting.
What happens when you don't attend? You get to
I'm
be
good
president?
with what we just discussed. I'm just saying, if you have one board member that's not here, that we want to put their input in on what process it is.
So what does that mean, like tabling it and then doing it at the next meeting, or?
Madam President, could I make a suggestion, given the comment? Since Jennifer's not here, seems like the general consensus of the board is to put together a timeline, and how those questions would be determined. So, it might be president and vice president and a third board member, just work together on creating that questionnaire. And maybe for the next meeting, we could bring back specifically, here would be the recommended timeline, here's when we put it out, here's where we advertise, here's the deadline, here's where the board would look at those and make a decision, that kind of thing. So it's a little more clear cut and not quite as nebulous. And that would then also give Jennifer a chance to weigh in, although you're not gonna be at the next meeting, but.
But, got good board members that will be, so. And so that's homework, right?
Are you good with that, John? Okay.
So I think we have at least at this point, we have the public knowledge, we have a consensus that that's the direction that we're planning.
Well, at least that we have the details of that
So
in
we'll-
the next meeting.
We'll have at the next board meeting a specific timeline and approach for the board to discuss.
Okay.
Does KASB, do they have example questions?
I will inquire, I'm sure they probably do.
We'll go out and go those.
Google's everything.
Right, they do. Okay, so then we'll move on to new business, which is, the discussion of proposal for superintendent transition report. We were given, today, print out, the request for the proposals for transition report. And Jennifer's here, do you mind kind of giving us a brief overview?
No, if you have any specific place you want me to stand up here.
I'm personally interested. I've never seen something like this before,
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm interested in where it come from.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so, it's my understanding that, Dr. Dominguez reached out maybe directly to Jennifer and, was interested in doing what you call a transitional plan. So it was brought to my attention initially just to review the contract with a company that, Dr. Dominguez had selected, which to me was new because working with other public entities, there's typically a process in place where it goes before a selection process, multiple entities and consultants can submit, and then the board, whoever the board may be in that instance, looks at cost, what are we being provided, how does this fit the district, and are they hitting all of our needs at the end of this. So my initial concern was just that somebody had already been selected and what that could look like from a bias perspective and whether or not we were weighing all the things that we needed to in a transitional plan if we were going to do one. So I went and did some research just to see, do districts do transitional plans? How realistic is this? What does it look like? And yes, there's tons out there. There's a bunch of consultants that do it. It's not a limited market. It's actually it's used very often. It's used more typically when a superintendent goes from one state to another state. So if the superintendent isn't going to a district that's within their own state, these transitional plans are used because they don't understand maybe how school finance is done in that particular state, or they may not have any background on HR or other. It's a lot of basis in administrative services. So really getting a handle on what happens in the district at that administrative level, kind of the people who would be in this building, and it gives back a report of the things that they need to know and understand from our district that might help them do their job. So in doing that, the next step was, I told Jennifer that, of course, the board, your guys' board policy says that the board may approve any consultant that staff brings to them. So your board policy really has no guidance or rules on a process that you have to do, which is bothersome to me. I think it should be a little bit more streamlined, but so I told Jennifer, I said, you all could take this back to the board and approve this contract that Dr. Dominguez has brought to you. He's essentially staff. He signed a contract with you, and he's brought you this consultant. So you can do that. My suggestion would be a little more transparency with the public, and putting together an RFP and soliciting proposals. You may only get this one firm, but you may get 12 or 13 to choose from, and that way you guys can make the best decision. So what I did is I went on, KASB actually has some examples of RFPs that have been done previously. I was telling Dr. Carlin earlier today, this was on here, it was very old. I'm not sure that it had ever been used, so we had to tweak it quite a bit to get it to where we wanted it. But I think it will get you what you need. The next step with this would, if you approve going through this process, would be giving this back to Dr. Dominguez so he can share it with the consultant that he proposed, so that they can make sure that the proposal they submitted meets our criteria. But I would also suggest that the board reach out to other consultants that do transitional plans and give them this RFP, so that you don't just sit idle and wait until May 6th and only get one response. The idea would be then at your May 9th board meeting, you could look at the results or the responses that you've received, and choose someone to move forward. In between the May 9th meeting and the May, I'm not gonna get this right, the second meeting in May 23rd, we would be negotiating the contract. If we were to move forward with the firm that submitted their proposal, I would want to completely redo that contract. There were some concerns that I have about just information and transparency of information between the board and the superintendent and staff and everyone who would use the transitional report. And then we would get a contract negotiated to be signed and approved at your meeting on the 23rd, and they could start work as early as the 24th. Which I know is only a little bit ahead of Dr. Dominguez's start date, but it's still well in advance of the beginning of the school year, and I think still probably sets us up for success for the purpose of a transitional plan. And so that's what's before you. If you have any questions about the RFP specifically, I can answer those. I've done a lot of RFP processes previously with the city. This one's very similar, it's just a different type of consultant. So,
Jennifer, I feel like, and I can be totally off, or something like that, Department of Information.
yeah.
But one of the things that I thought I remembered was that Dr. Dominguez would like to have this done before Dr. Carlin leaves, and so, is that wrong? Is it possible? Because we just got this on our, and it's new business, so I don't know if it would be something that the board would be comfortable moving forward with tonight. Was there any time, reason we wanted to get this moving quickly?
No one said to me that they wanted to have this done before Dr. Carlin left. I do feel like it came very fast. It was something that you guys were actually going to approve tonight. The previous, approve or disapprove. You guys were going to have before you tonight the contract with the other firm chosen by Dr. Dominguez. And my fear in that was just that a lot of things could happen with that. If the transitional plan came back and gave information about current employees that work for us, whether that be teachers or principals or administrative staff or whoever it is, and it was strongly negative or something in that light, it didn't go over well, and then Dr. Dominguez starts, those two things might not go well together. And I didn't want them starting off on the wrong foot and then everyone going, well, we didn't ask anybody else. The only person we asked was this firm that was chosen by our new superintendent who is new to us. And I don't want anyone to start off on that foot, and I think that it's just really important. And so that's actually why I said, could we slow down just a little bit and pull back? Would we still have time for, if the consultants were on board, would we still have time for them to talk to Dr. Carlin? And would there still be time for them to talk to the principals and the teachers? Would they still be around? And it sounded like on the time frame we were talking about when I asked Dr. Carlin that was still feasible.
So we would not have to approve this tonight?
If you don't approve it tonight, it would basically just slide everything. And so I don't see any issue with that. I don't think that you have to be rushed by making this decision if you don't want to go through an RFP process. I think from what I understand is that the teachers and principals, because of their contracts, would still be available for questions or things like that, and I think all of the administrative staff would be available. It would just be whether or not the consultants were available during that time frame.
Principals are, I think our elementary principals are until the 5th of June, 6th of June.
So you'd have,
but they also are involved with interviews and hiring most of the summer, and we do some flex days with them for a limited number, but when they have to work in the summer. So I'm not terribly concerned about having access to principals. Teachers, however, I mean, there will be some that will be around, but
you won't get all of them.
yeah, but you know, the day after school's out, most of our teachers are no longer obligated with their contract, but.
I think what you would find with something like this, especially for those who are vested in what I've picked up from other ones that have been done, is that those teachers and those principals who are coming back next school year and are gonna have to work with Dr. Dominguez and those administrative staffs that are gonna have to work with them, they're gonna put in the effort. If they're notified that this is going on, whether it's May 24th or whether it's June 2nd, they're gonna show up and they're gonna give their input, they're gonna answer their questions, they're gonna do whatever they can to make this transition as good and viable for the district as they can. And those that don't participate on the 2nd versus the 24th, they weren't probably going to participate anyways or give their full effort anyways. So, you know, balancing that, I think as long as you make it available and not just like at one stringent time, I think you'll be okay.
So basically this is something that Dr. Dominguez has requested.
He didn't request the RFP. He just requested the transitional plan. So he selected a firm that he is familiar with, and he's very interested in having a transitional plan. And I think for me, this was new. For Dr. Carlin, this was something that was new. Obviously, we as a district have been, we've had a lot of people within our district be in leadership roles, and so we haven't necessarily had anybody from out of state come to our district, so I think that's why it was new. And so he suggested this, and just in thinking globally about the district, I didn't think it was a super great idea to just jump into one group. So this is something that he suggested, yes.
And it's in it.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, well, just a question on cost. Since this is new, what does something like this cost?
So that's another interesting point in this. There's not a lot of information when I did research to see what it should cost or what it does cost. The one that Dr. Dominguez provided to me in contract was $12,500. But now that was based on what they were asking, what Dr. Dominguez was asking them to do. This may be a little more global. I added a few things in there from the administrative perspective that I've seen from the district that I think if someone was transitioning, it would be important for them to know. So there may be a few things that might change the price, but I think that's why it's important to get multiple, because when you only have one, it's hard to know, is that price reasonable or is that price high, is that price low? And if you get 12, then you can look at all of them collectively and say, okay, this is about what it should cost.
Just to follow the line of thinking there. I'm just wondering, first of all, I think he has spent a little bit of time with staff and with Dr. Carlin, and certainly he's got you as a resource. So why is an outside consultant even needed?
That's not a question that I can answer for you. I simply was asked to whether or not I would approve a contract with a single firm to do a transitional plan, and I can't, as your legal counsel, agree to that. So this was that happy medium between allowing that, but also allowing the transparency for the community and for you as board members to be protected by the decision that you make.
I think for example, I'll try to keep it short. For example, Dr. Dominguez, I was impressed, and a lot of people have been impressed by his uptake of information. And so, if he comes on the job and he takes, like the sponge that he is, and there's still some question in evaluating, maybe that would be the right time to entertain a consultant on some specific questions. That's just where I'm coming from on this matter, and so I'm just letting you know. Thank you.
So if we would request these, if I read this right, we can choose not to approve one if we don't feel like that.
Absolutely. Just because you put the request for proposals out there does not mean that you're going to accept any of the proposals. So at the end of this, you can decide if you have conversations, if all of you have conversations with Dr. Dominguez between now and then, now that you've been a little more educated on the subject and you understand what's before you, if you have conversations with him or you do some research about transitional plans or whatever it may be, and these proposals come up, you're not required to choose anybody. You're not required to go forward with the transitional plan. This is just something that your new superintendent has asked for, and I just wanted to make sure if you were going to do it, that we did it the right way.
I think it would be beneficial, especially with so many changes in administration.
what it's supposed to be, and I think if you all are going to do it, that's the way you should do it, is from an unbiased perspective, and it should be something that you all choose, and it should be a report not just for Dr. Dominguez, but also for you as a board, because you may not understand some of the things that the transitional report goes through, and you know, that contract and the words and how it's put together is really important for who that information goes to and who has access to it. And I think for you all, if you're going to spend taxpayer dollars, that transparency piece is really important.
Anybody have other questions or comments for Jennifer?
I agree. I just want Dr. Dominguez to figure out how we want to have the most information possible. And this is something that he would like to pursue. I think we should go through the process, helping through that.
I agree with you that should we give it, not approved tonight?
Oh, yeah.
New business or?
That's up to all of us.
Is there any risk of going and asking for proposals? I mean, when you said we were not locked into one, right? So
You don't have to choose anyone from the process if you don't want to.
moving forward and getting started, we don't have to. We decide we don't want to do it, we don't do it.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer and I had a conversation about this, because I believe it was on the agenda last, that we took it off, with Jennifer's like input. I think it was really good, and I'm thankful for that. Thank you, Jennifer, for, putting that out there for us, but I'm on board with that too, as well. But again, I mean, Jennifer's not here, so if you want full board, we can wait, or we can just move forward with asking for proposals.
Yeah. I actually had a conversation with Jennifer about this, so I know where she's at.
Okay. Jackie, do you?
I think we owe it to Dr. Dominguez to provide them a tool, or at least an opportunity for a tool for them to be successful.
Well, I'm still wrapping my head about what we're evaluating. I'm just haven't digested this yet.
Do you, sorry,
Maybe getting bids would help us understand what we can get out of it. Because I'm not familiar with this either, but it would be nice to know what can they give us, what do they provide in those terms.
And this is very common, right?
So it's not very common, because a lot of, if you look at superintendents, it seems that they typically stay within what we've experienced, like Dr. Carlin, who was an assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, all within our school district. So he understood our school district as he went through, and so that is actually more typical. And then the next one would be going within your state. And so if you're going within your state, a lot of the finance rules and other regulations that you face are similar. So the transition plan isn't as necessary. So when I first started looking for these, I couldn't find a whole lot of examples of schools that had done transitional plans. So I started looking more across the US, and it looked like it was used more often when someone went from one state to another state and maybe didn't understand the rules and regulations, or the school finance of the state that they were going to. And I know that the one that Dr. Dominguez provided to me was very heavy on finance. It was very heavy on understanding school finance. And so in the one that I did, I include the school finance, but I also included your HR and other administrative services. And the reason I did that is because you guys are also in the process of losing Dr. Carlin. You're losing Heath Hogan, who has been your HR person for quite some time and has been the go-to representative for all HR issues. And I know you guys have a transition plan in place, but you're also transitioning your superintendent and several other roles at the same time. And I think it's just really important that if you're going to look at administrative functions and you're going to spend this money and you're going to have someone here, you might as well have them look at the entire perspective, so that they really know what they need to know in order to be successful. And so that's how I tailored this one. I think the other one was a little more specified on finance. But yes, it's used, I would not say, common probably is not the right word. It's done. It's something that superintendents have done. It's not totally out of the box. But it's not like every time a superintendent goes to a new school district, they don't do one. So it's not that common.
I just want to make sure that the misperception that doesn't really occur. Friday, Dr. Dominguez spent most of the day with me, and we spent an hour or an hour and a half together, and then we spent an hour and a half with Mr. Hogan looking at HR stuff. We spent a little over an hour with Colleen. She was on Zoom because she was at some professional development, and then we spent an hour and a half with Glenda and Jason. And I think Mr. Hogan got through most of his stuff. Colleen put together a binder about this thick and got through the first 3 tabs, I think. And Glenda got through a few of the handbooks and the things that she brought. So we are in the process, and we've tentatively set some dates, which I'll be sharing with you in the future, where Dr. Dominguez will be involved in some interviews for some open positions that will be coming up, because he'll be the person that, you know, lives with those decisions. So we're working him into being involved with that. We'll take some time during those days also to get through the rest of the book, the binders, and get through the rest of the information that Glenda and Jason were going over. So I just don't want there to appear to the public that there's a vacuum out there of what we're doing for him. We are providing, as I told him, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly, but there's things as a superintendent that I know that he needs to know. And so there is a transition plan, if you will, from the standpoint of my team is assembling information and giving him information that we think is going to be essential for him to have so he can hit the ground running. So just so people realize that.
Okay, so just.
Are you guys done with
Any
me?
other questions for Jennifer?
Okay.
Okay, so, does the board want to take any action tonight on this, issue? I feel like Kimmy suggested we at least move forward with getting bids, like putting a bid date out there. Does anybody else have any comments or suggestions? Mark, are you not in favor of that? I didn't read what exactly you're saying.
I'm certainly supportive of Dr. Dominguez and what he feels like he needs. I don't think he laid that out in his 30, 60, 90-day transition plan to bring in a consultant. But it sounds like it's done. And
I don't feel like it's done. I feel like we would have some time to get
well, I mean,
some more
it is
information.
done in the industry. I don't mean it's a done deal.
Okay.
I mean, it's done in the industry. So yeah, it's right. Seems superfluous to me, but I certainly support it. The other aspect too is it's kind of nice to look at proposals, but I think it's disingenuous if you're not committed to get to select one of them to ask for. It's because people put it all over. I'm just at that point where I'm not sure this is necessary. Partly I don't know what the negative aspects would be. You can control that a little bit if you know the contractor and their reputation. Any auditor can come in and find problems. And so I get the sense maybe this isn't really the goal. This is just to help him have a heads up on key elements that are going in the transition. But I sure thought he knew that already, from the standpoint of position. And that's not negative on him. He's a powerful guy. He's super. So I certainly am not going to vote against a motion to proceed. Which is not sure is needed.
We asked for communication just from Dr. Dominguez on what he feels like the benefit of this would be, and then give us benefits that he sees that he would have and how it helps him hit the ground running faster.
I like that.
mean, just as far as good communication, it's a surprise coming this direction, but maybe not for all of us. But certainly if we've come up with something else, it's probably not communicated back to him, but it's just good communication.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Then we kind of do a little bit more communication on this, and then we'll bring back. Awesome. All right. Then we are at board open discussion / self-evaluation. John, you want to start us off?
Sure. I thought, had a lot of great stuff tonight, a lot of people in here, that we got to celebrate, which is always wonderful, both staff and students. I thought that was awesome, and as I mentioned last week, we had a lot of work to do this week, and, we did, so we got our way through it.
A lot of information. A lot of information to go over again and to, but it is nice to have all the recognitions and see the good things that teachers and students.
Just for the general public knowledge, our board book was 435 pages. Is that and didn't include these things? Mark?
Yeah, a lot of exciting things. It's kind of a sprint to the end of the year. Holy cow, we're getting pretty darn close. I have to apologize. I was really looking forward to attending high school graduation. My son is graduating from K-State that same day, so I'll be there. Yes,
Check,
gotta
right?
celebrate everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's just gonna be fabulous, and I can't believe we're already here this time of the year. But some great things happen. Anything else?
I thought there was a lot of great presentations tonight, and I know a lot of time and effort goes into all of this, so thank you for doing that. It's much appreciated.
Dr. Carlin?
So first, I think maybe we're having some sound issues with our system tonight, so I apologize for that. You might notice Jason's recording on an iPad, so we'll try to get a recording out the best we can. And we'll be working on why we had the sound issues tonight and try to get that rectified, because I think last time things went great. So, but new stuff, we're kind of learning how to troubleshoot that and take care of that. Also, we have an electrical thing we're doing in this building on Friday. It potentially will shut this building down for maybe a day while we're doing this upgrade. We have a generator that's supposed to run our server room and our freezer and that kind of stuff. The server room provides the phones and the internet for most of the district. If everything works like it's supposed to, when they start this upgrade, our generator will handle that, and nobody other than a few people in this building being in the dark who we're making some arrangements with will notice it. But like every good plan, there's always the chance that everything doesn't work perfectly. So hopefully Friday afternoon will go well, and by sometime on Saturday they'll have the update done, and then our new ventilation system we should be able to get it fully operational. It feels like the cool is working pretty well tonight. So, Achieve graduation will be before our next meeting, I believe on May 7th. So we won't have another opportunity to kind of highlight that. Board members are also invited to that. That's fun. There's been a few years lately where they've came on the same day, but this year they're back to, used to be they were always a week apart. They're kind of back to that schedule. And then high school graduation, as Mark mentioned, will be on the 14th, and I believe it's at 10 or 10:30. So that's a little bit of a time change. Mr. Nordby has, and the staff at the high school have made that adjustment. So just as you're thinking about that, keep that in your mind. If you, I don't know that anybody here has one graduating this year from the high school, but other board members have expressed, and Dana and Mark may validate this, that's kind of a pretty enjoyable time to be able to hand out diplomas. So hopefully you're available and can build that into your schedule. So
And back to one ceremony.
yeah, we're back to one big ceremony. So
Yeah, particularly if I can elaborate just a little bit, it's just so cool, as you can imagine, to sort of rotate amongst us and shake the hands of those kids and do a quick pick and off they go, and then participate and hear the speakers, and it's just a grand community event. I hate to miss it.
And in my 6 years so far of being superintendent, we've only had one fumble, we've only had one diploma hit the ground, so we'll work with you ahead of time on how to do all that, so.
Well, I would just echo what everybody else said. The things that stand out to me whenever we have kids coming and accepting awards is the teachers that encourage them and are behind them, helping them to reach those successes, and obviously the parents too. So I'm just very thankful for that. And then the kind of above and beyond, several committees that got together, spent the extra time. So our teachers regularly show that they go above and beyond just their everyday work in the classroom. So I'm just very thankful for that, and just want to acknowledge that too. So fun to see the kids, and so that just makes the meetings a little bit more fun too. So the next meeting of the Board of Education will take place on Monday, May 9th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the board meeting room at the Educational Support Center. That will not be the address, but it's time for executive session.
We have several this evening, so Madam Chair, I move that we go to executive session for 15 minutes for consideration of student due process appeal decision pursuant to the exception related to action adversarial